Chapter 1038. The blue hole in the sword burial chain was still relentlessly absorbing the flying swords. A peculiar phenomenon began to unfold, and in Lin and Lan Xiaoni's expressions shifted drastically. The ground around us is shrinking. Lan Xiaoni's eyes widened, and she instinctively flew into the air as she instinctively distanced herself from the ground. This is most likely a fake ground. And Lin's lips twitched. The ground continued to shrink with the blue hole at the center, as if the entire world was shrinking with it at the center. As for where the disappearing matter went, even Lin didn't know. The only consolation was that the death swords in the ground weren't fake. As the ground shrank, the entire space seemed to be shrinking as well. And Lin could see a murky gray boundary quickly crashing down toward him, as if it were a cage that was enshrouding a living being, and it continued to shrink until it exploded. After all of the death swords had been absorbed, and Lin quickly stowed the sword burial chain away before unleashing his divine flames and holy flames toward the boundary. Lan Xiaoni's features paled, and she summoned a massive wave to crash toward the shrinking boundary. However, the massive wave was instantly evaporated into water vapor upon crashing into Lin's divine flames. Lin's divine flames were also slightly weakened as a result. Lan Xiaoni, if it weren't for the fact that you can't die, I would definitely toss you out of here right now, Lin said with a serious expression. Lan Xiaoni hung her head in shame as tears welled up in her eyes. Boom! The shrinking boundary clashed with the flames, instantly dispersing them. It's this powerful? And Lin drew a sharp intake of breath. He was just about to unleash his origin energy of the netherworld in a last-ditch effort when the spatial boundary completely shrank before engulfing both his and Lan Xiaoni's bodies. Another burst of dazzling spatial teleportation ensued, and Lin opened his eyes again to find that he had arrived in a sealed corridor. The corridor was quite wide and was constructed from green bricks. Countless blue candlelight lit up the sides of the corridor, and there were statues of mermaids and heavenly turtle tribe members standing on either side of the corridor. The expressions of the statues were either smiling, laughing, fearful, or twisted. Some of their smiles were so wide that their mouths even reached their ears. In any case, they all looked very painful to the eyes. Sealed, quiet, strange, terrifying, a certain atmosphere was spreading. Lan Xiaoni's reaction became even more intense at the sight of the mermaid statues, and her breathing accelerated as she silently leaned against Lin. Lin said impatiently, "Stay away from me. Your seafood smell is too strong." Lan Xiaoni almost threw up a mouthful of blood upon hearing this. "This is not the aroma of seafood. It's the aroma of your body. Do you understand? How can you use such a clumsy adjective as seafood when I have such an enchanting aroma?" The noble mermaid princess couldn't hold it in any longer. For the first time, she dissed Lin. He could look down on her, but how could he insult her fragrance? And Lin didn't get angry. He just asked curiously, "But it smells delicious. Isn't it just the smell of seafood?" Lan Xiaoni's teeth chattered with rage. All of a sudden, she seemed to have noticed something, and she couldn't help but stumble back a few steps as she screamed, Don't even think about that. I may be beautiful, but I don't taste good." And Lin stared at Lan Xiaoni with confusion on his face. Why did she say something like that? He didn't understand what was going on. Was there something wrong with this woman? He had yet to realize just how much damage he had dealt to this mermaid princess heart by describing her as a seafood flavor. Lan Xiaoni felt like Lin was trying to eat her by describing her as seafood. And Lin shook his head and continued down the corridor. He touched the statues to find that they were all made from copper and didn't look very special. This made him give up on the idea of taking all of the statues with him. He couldn't do that, as it would leave a bad impression on the tomb's owner. It was better to take the best treasures with him. The two of them walked for a short while before arriving at the end of the corridor. Within a circular chamber, there were two tightly shut doors and a key. One of the doors had the words "Tomb Treasure" written on it, while the other door had the words "Tribe Secret" written on it. It was quite clear that she could only choose one of the two paths. A scorching light appeared in Lan Xiaoni's eyes as she looked at the door to the tribe's secret. She had never forgotten her mission, which was to fight for the future of the Spirit Fish clan. It was quite clear that the door to the tribe's secret contained information that would determine the future of the Spirit Fish clan. Lan Xiaoni made her way toward the key and held it tightly in her hand as she looked at the door with the words "Tribe's Secret" written on it, as if she were looking at a door of hope. She slowly made her way toward the door before a hand clamped down on her snowy white shoulder. "Boy, where are you going?" "You're going in the wrong direction." A steady but dignified voice suddenly came from behind him. Lan Xiaoni's body shuddered as she turned around with difficulty to look into the eyes of a man with an implacable expression. But we can find more treasures. The future of our tribe is more important," Lan Xiaoni argued. She had already expended a lot of courage to say this, and Lin chuckled lightly upon hearing this. "What does the future of your tribe have to do with me? I only want the treasures." Lan Xiaoni's eyes widened with incredulity. Didn't Guyu make an agreement with you? Didn't it ask you to bring back the secret of the Heavenly Turtle tribe?" Guyu had personally escorted Lin here, so there was no way that Lan Xiaoni would believe that the two of them hadn't reached some sort of agreement. "There was an agreement. It told me to take all of the treasures in the tomb after I entered it. After that, if I encountered any information that I didn't understand, I would take a picture of it and bring it back with me." And Lin spoke with a nonchalant expression. Lan Xiaoni was astonished. What a blissful request. The stark contrast between the two of them almost brought tears to Lan Xiaoni's eyes. She had come here with the heavy responsibility of her tribe on her shoulders, but Lin was here to make money. But how could she give up? Fighting for the future of her tribe was a form of honor, and she wasn't going to back down because of this. And Lin pointed at the ancient tomb treasure vault door and issued a stern command. "Hurry up and open the door with the key." "Yes." Lan Xiaoni nodded obediently before making her way over to the ancient tomb treasure vault door and opening it with the key. And Lin was too powerful. Fighting him head-on was not a rational course of action, so she had to endure this humiliation. The two of them entered the door and walked along a narrow corridor. Soon, they emerged from the corridor and arrived at an extremely spacious area. A statue of a Spirit Fish clan man over 10,000 feet tall stood at the very center. He had a handsome face with long, curly hair that fell all the way down to his waist, and he held an intricately crafted staff in his hand. After the two of them arrived at the spacious area, the two eyes of the statue suddenly turned to stare directly at Lin and Lan Xiaoni. And Lin's heart constricted as he felt like he was being stared at by some kind of power. Lan Xiaoni couldn't help but let loose a cry of surprise. "He's the high priest of our tribe buried in the ancient tomb, Shihaizi." Chapter 1039. Shihaizi? And Lin chuckled upon hearing this. "I'm talking about Siemens." The huge Spirit Fish clan statue's eyeballs could move around, which was quite a harrowing sight to behold. However, Lin was already used to its gaze, so he didn't pay it much heed. No matter how bad *SS it was still a statue. Was it going to jump out and beat him up? "However, you said that Shihaizi is the high priest of your tribe. Could it be that a man fell in love with a huge turtle?" And Lin came to his senses and was extremely astonished. He wasn't interested in listening to Guyu's love story, but thinking about it now, it was way too *King exciting. He had always thought that it was a male turtle who fell in love with a mermaid, but it turned out that it was a handsome fish who fell in love with a female turtle. This was as terrifying as Xian Yuan Cheng falling in love with Qinghua. Lan Xiaoni cocked her head to the side with a perplexed expression. This is a love that transcends species. Is there a problem? She discovered that she was unable to keep up with Lin's train of thought. Was this the world of powerful beings? Was this how powerful beings thought? And Lin waved his hand in resignation. He couldn't even be bothered to complain. He was unable to accept this type of love, so he could only turn his gaze elsewhere to distract himself. However, he discovered that there was nothing around him. Could it be that the treasure was this statue? What the *CK? Fated ones, Welcome to the tomb of me and Tian Chinchi." A voice suddenly erupted from the statue's mouth. This voice was as loud as rumbling thunder. Enlin turned to look at the statue, and his eyes met with the statue's round eyes. He stroked his chin with a contemplative expression. A statue that could talk should be quite valuable, right? Lan Xiaoni's hands clenched into tight fists. This ancient high priest could talk. You've chosen the treasure path, so you have to unleash the corresponding power. If you die on the treasure path, then it only means that you and I are not fated to be together. The stone statue began to move and slowly spread its arms. Rumble. 6 balls of light of different colors appeared before Enlin and Lan Xiaoni. The colors of the balls of light were black, white, blue, yellow, green, and red. Each ball of light can lead you to a different world, where you can obtain different supreme treasures. You can choose now, the statue of Shi Haizi said with a smile. Lan Xiaoni pointed at the blue ball of light. "I want to go to this world." And Lin pointed at the yellow orb. "I want to go to this world." The two of them chose different worlds. Lan Xiaoni's heart was filled with excitement. She knew that her opportunity had come. If the two of them went to different worlds, she would be able to get rid of the fear of being dominated by Enlin. She would be free and fight for her own interests. The statue spoke again. "Two fated ones, please choose the same ball of light." Lan Xiaoni. "Shall we choose again then?" Enlin looked at Lan Xiaoni with a smile. Lan Xiaoni forced a smile onto her face. "All right." The second choice was the light orb. Enlin chose the yellow orb again. Lan Xiaoni also pointed toward the yellow ball of light. The two of them quickly reached a consensus. There was no discussion, no quarrel, and they had a tacit understanding of each other. "All right, I'll teleport you to the yellow ball realm now." The statue of Shi Haizi spoke with a gratified expression. He didn't forget to add, "What a harmonious couple." Lan Xiaoni and Lin, did this stupid statue misunderstand something? They had entered the tomb together, but they weren't a couple. And Lin was just about to let loose a torrent of abuse when the yellow ball of light quickly expanded and engulfed the two of them. Another terrifying rush of dizziness ensued, and Lin felt like he was about to throw up. Following on from his fear of heights and his dizziness of sword kinesis flight, he felt like he was about to suffer from another fear of teleportation. The space around them transformed. The two of them instantly appeared within a vast expanse of yellow sand. It was as if the sky had been scorched by flames as golden clouds surged and surged, accompanied by scorching heat waves. The terrifyingly high temperatures caused the air in the desert to warp and warp. If a normal living being were to appear here, they would probably be scorched to death within a few seconds. "It's so hot," Lan Xiaoni complained in a faint voice. She was dressed very skimpily. Her upper body was only wrapped in a blue satin cloth, revealing her towering snow-white breasts. Whether it was her waist, her smooth and round shoulders, or her snow-white, smooth, and beautiful back, they were all exposed. This type of attire was extremely common among the mermaid tribe. However, even in such a skimpy outfit, she was still unable to withstand the scorching heat of the desert, and she unleashed a spell technique to maintain her body's coolness. Enlin glanced at Lan Xiaoni with a resigned expression. He was wondering why the Spirit Fish clan would entrust their hopes to such a spoiled princess. This didn't make any sense. Lan Xiaoni was weak, timid, and extremely afraid of death. She didn't even have the courage to resist him, so how was she going to become his enemy? Enlin was a little perplexed, and he silently walked at the forefront. Lan Xiaoni silently followed along behind him. Every world had a treasure, and the statue had said that obtaining the treasure required one's own power. If one were to die by accident, that would only prove that they weren't fated to enter the tomb. This meant that there was definitely a great danger in this desert. And Lin didn't dare to let his guard down, and he used his divine sense to survey his surroundings as he continued onward. The scorching desert appeared to be boundless and boundless, but he soon discovered through his powerful divine sense that the temperature was different depending on which direction he walked in. He began to walk in the direction where the temperature was getting higher and higher. Why is it getting hotter and hotter? The silly mermaid princess was a little perplexed, and she looked around nervously as she spoke with an uneasy expression. She was worried that she would be scalded to death. And Lin couldn't be bothered to respond to Lan Xiaoni, and he continued onward. The temperature was getting hotter and hotter, and the vital energy imbued sand beneath his feet had already become a scorching golden-white color. It was even hotter than a red-hot metal plate. Lan Xiaoni's fishtail had already left the ground as she unleashed a water-type spell technique to dissipate the heat from her body. She didn't want her lower body to become a sizzling, hot metal plate. She was afraid that if she did, Lin wouldn't be able to control himself and would eat her. Eat was the literal meaning of the word. Lan Xiaoni had already imagined Lin to be a demon king who liked to eat spirit fish clan cultivators. He had said that her body odor was seafood, and that was a blatant attempt at seduction and innuendo. Just as Lan Xiaoni was thinking about all sorts of random things, Lin suddenly stopped in his tracks. "We're here," Lin said. Lan Xiaoni turned to Lin with a confused expression. All of a sudden, the scorching sand on the ground caved in like quicksand. Lan Xiaoni's expression shifted, but she didn't get a chance to do anything. Boom! The sand suddenly exploded. A huge insect enshrouded in golden flames flew into the sky before opening its mouth, which was lined with sharp teeth, and it bit toward Lan Xiaoni at an extremely terrifying speed. The insect had made a choice between Lin and Lan Xiaoni. It wanted to eat seafood. Chapter 1040. Only black, white, blue, green, and red remained within the ball of light. Lan Xiaoni clasped a hand over her voluptuous chest as her heart throbbed with pain at the sight of Lin's elated expression. Boom! Blue energy erupted into the sky, and it had killed a sandworm. This was the spell technique derived from the first stage of Lin's God cultivation method, Extreme Frost Vortex. With each and every breath it took, white spikes would expand and contract on its body, bringing with them bursts of heat waves. Lin silently pulled out the shimmering golden ball and activated his divine inspection technique. However, Lin didn't even look at the sandworms. Instead, he abruptly stomped a foot into the sand. Her ice wall was still erected in front of her. The little blue fish had been accumulating energy for too long, and its eyes had rolled over into the back of its head. It had no choice but to unleash its energy into the sky. Lin, what the F***CK? Were these treasures left for the Heavenly Turtle Tribe and the Spirit Fish Clan? My dear ancestor, you're giving all your treasures to a human so that he can revitalize the entire human race. She had been on guard against Lin eating her seafood this entire time. But who would have thought that the monsters of this world would also want to eat her seafood? The blue vortex instantly expanded to over a kilometer in size, and the power of extreme frost within the dark blue darkness froze and engulfed everything around it. Heaven and earth seemed to have sensed that its most powerful being had been slain, and a powerful spatial power enshrouded Lin and Lan Xiaoni's bodies. Lin shrugged and kicked the ball lightly, without looking at Lan Xiaoni, who was trying to put on a cute front. A certain patch of golden sand suddenly exploded, and a ball burning with golden flames flew out, causing the temperature in the entire space to soar explosively. However, it didn't even get a chance to unleash its power before the vortex engulfed it. Lin, so many powerful sandworms and super terrifying fireball monsters have been insta-killed. Lan Xiaoni let loose a delicate cry as the white ball materialized an ice wall in front of her. At the same time, she commanded the blue fish to open its mouth to accumulate powerful frost energy. Too late, and Lin let loose a light cry. Extreme Frost Vortex. TSK, TSK, TSK. That's more like the hope of the entire spirit fish race. And Lin chuckled. A gratified smile appeared on the Shi-Heizi statue's face. What a harmonious couple. There's no need for any discussion. Gotcha. And Lin snatched the treasure away again, but she didn't get anything. She had obviously put in a lot of effort. Okay. The fireball seemed to be able to feel the terror of the vortex in Lin's palm. Its spikes retracted, and its whole body trembled. Wait, the fireball contained an extremely terrifying power of fire. Wherever it passed, the void distorted, and the special golden sand on the sandy ground was instantly melted into high-temperature golden liquid. Lan Xiaoni had a mental breakdown, and she threw up a mouthful of blood. Bang! The golden spiked fireball let out a loud roar, and a dazzling golden light erupted from its body, as if it wanted to draw the flame power of the entire desert to resist Enlin's vortex. Lan Xiaoni's expression shifted slightly upon seeing so many sandworms, and she was just about to take the initiative to attack. A faint smile appeared on Enlin's face. I definitely will. Moments later, Enlin and Lan Xiaoni appeared in the cavernous chamber again. Get the F***CK out here. Roar. A roar of pain intermingled with rage erupted. Enlin silently made his way toward the fireball that had been frozen into a block of ice. A gratified expression appeared on the Shi Haizi statue's face. Congratulations, fated ones. You have successfully passed the trial of the Ball of Light. I hope you could take the treasures with you and revitalize your tribe. The vortex gradually subsided, and snow began to fall from heaven and earth. Boom, boom, boom. A ball of light appeared in front of the Shi Haizi statue again, and it floated toward Enlin and Lan Xiaoni. Enlin picked up a shimmering golden ball from the ground and put it into his storage ring with a practiced motion. He was very familiar with killing bosses and obtaining treasures. The nauseating feeling of dizziness struck him again. The golden spiked fireball chortled with glee as two smaller fireballs appeared on either side of it, which it hurled toward Enlin and Lan Xiaoni. The 8 huge, flaming sandworms didn't even have a chance to wail before they were frozen into pieces. Enlin stroked his chin and pondered for a moment before pointing at the green ball of light. Just the blue fish alone wasn't enough. This was her other trump card. At this moment, the statue began to move again. The sandworm opened its mouth to swallow Lan Xiaoni, and it was just about to chew on her when its body suddenly shuddered as a blue stream of energy exploded from within, instantly freezing the flaming sandworm's body and extinguishing its flames. Everything fell silent again. The power that Lan Xiaoni had just displayed was the power that belonged to the most powerful group of living beings of the soul formation stage. But she was only at the soul formation stage. She couldn't compare to Enlin. Lan Xiaoni. Tears almost flowed from Lan Xiaoni's eyes as she looked at the gargantuan, flaming sandworm. A violent tremor erupted as the sandy ground caved in from his stomp. The ball of flames wailed with anguish like a drowning sun, but its voice grew softer and softer before it was engulfed by the power of extreme frost. A faint smile appeared on Enlin's face as he clapped his hands together. When they separated again, a blue vortex appeared between his palms, and the power of extreme frost instantly extinguished the scorching heat within a radius of over a kilometer, only to be replaced by the frigid coldness of winter. Boom! Now, you still have a chance to enter the world of the Ball of Light and search for your opportunities. Enlin hated this type of spatial transfer method. It wasn't friendly at all. The mermaid princess was so frightened that she summoned another white ball and stared at the ball of flames with a fearful expression. The flaming sandworm was most likely at the soul formation final stage, but it was insta-killed by Lan Xiaoni. Lan Xiaoni's expression shifted drastically upon seeing this. That powerful aura, that terrifying temperature. There's no mistaking it. It's the source of this world's heat. Golden Sun Chaotic Stone, a divine stone that exists within chaos. It's extremely sturdy and possesses powerful energy storage properties. It's a divine rank material. Enlin drew a sharp intake of breath. The value of this treasure had once again exceeded his imagination. The two of them happily reached an agreement. The ball of flames exploded into a vast amount of ice shards that rained down upon the earth. Heaven and earth were extremely cold, and the vortex was boundless. Roha, seeing as you're so eager to die, I'll grant your wish. Lan Xiaoni remained silent. Insta-killed? They're all dead? Lan Xiaoni stared blankly at the scenes unfolding before her eyes. Lan Xiaoni pointed toward the green ball of light expressionlessly. Lan Xiaoni's lips twitched, but she couldn't bring herself to smile. She was going to offer a salute to Enlin for his battle. Crack! Lan Xiaoni's entire body was enshrouded in a suit of ice, and a cold and proud expression appeared on her face as a fierce aura emanated from her body. There was a small blue fish swimming around her palm. The flaming sandworm's body exploded. Bam! Lan Xiaoni pouted with an aggrieved expression, but she didn't dare to say anything. The ball of flames was still shrieking in fear, but its expression had frozen. 8 more flaming sandworms with extremely powerful auras crawled out from the sand around them before glaring at the two of them with menacing expressions. Divine rank material. Unfortunately, the statues were like dumb NPCs, completely oblivious to this fact. Chapter 10:41. A wave of nauseating dizziness swept over them again. Enlin and Lan Xiaoni appeared within a forest. They began to search for treasures of this world in the forest. The forest was very large, and there were all types of ferocious beasts and extremely poisonous plants attacking them. However, all of these malicious beasts were wiped out by Lan Xiaoni. Enlin couldn't be bothered to do anything, so Lan Xiaoni did her best to make her presence known and demonstrate her value, hoping that Enlin would see her efforts and reward her with a treasure of this world. Of course, this was only wishful thinking on her part. Enlin continued onward with a buoyant grin and didn't stop the mermaid from fawning over him. Why would he stop an underling from clearing monsters for him for free? Lan Xiaoni could handle normal dangers, so he didn't have to worry about her safety. The two of them continued onward into the forest. All of a sudden, an inky black vine broke through Lan Xiaoni's wall of water like a sharp sword before extending its flexible branches toward her. Ah! Lan Xiaoni screamed as her body was bound by the vines, temporarily immobilizing her. Inky black vines wrapped around Lan Xiaoni's long and sleek fishtail, and her slender waist was also tightly bound. Her snowy white arms were locked in place, and her chest was also bound by vines. Her snowy white breasts were almost about to pop out of the blue silk fabric. As Lan Xiaoni struggled, every inch of her body was revealed to the world. Enlin was astonished as he stared blankly at the erotic scenes unfolding before his eyes. Binding? How thrilling! Ha ha! Don't even think about getting close to the king of the forest. I'm going to bring an end to all of you. A huge black tree emerged from nearby with a sinister smile on its face. Another inky black vine pounced toward Enlin at an extremely fast speed. Enlin was just about to do something when a powerful aura suddenly erupted from nearby. You King pervert die. Lan Xiaoni's enraged voice sounded. Water burst out of her body, pushing the vines away. Her body was like a fish swimming out of the range of the vines. At the same time, she controlled a small blue fish to pierce through the air and instantly puncture the giant tree monster's head. Die, die, die. Lan Xiaoni still hadn't vented her anger, and she manipulated the little blue fish to smash over 100 massive holes into the massive tree and shredded the vines into extremely tiny pieces of wood. In short, it was miserable. Enlin's horizons were greatly broadened as he witnessed Lan Xiaoni's transformation from a little kitten to a tigress. Lan Xiaoni was only slightly appeased after seeing that the giant tree monster was as dead as a doornail. Her face was flushed and she was breathing heavily. The snow-white peaks on her chest rose and fell with her breathing, giving her a different kind of charm. You didn't see anything, right? Lan Xiaoni bit down on her lower lip with a pitiable expression. The scene of being tied up was too shameful. She hoped that Enlin would forget about it. Enlin chuckled. How could I not see it? I'm not blind. You. Lan Xiaoni's eyes widened with rage, and her chest trembled with rage. What's wrong? I'm just telling the truth. Enlin's eyes darkened as his imposing aura spread out. You're right. Lan Xiaoni lowered her head with an aggrieved expression. Thus, the two of them continued onward. Lan Xiaoni still hadn't recovered from the events that had just transpired, and the blush on her face had yet to recede. As they ventured deeper and deeper into the forest. Monsters on par with the giant tree monster would appear from time to time. She didn't dare to get complacent, and she could only summon the little fish to protect herself. Ha ha! If you want to kill our king of the forest, you'll have to get past me first. Pwah! Ah! Lan Xiaoni slew a huge ape expressionlessly. I swear to protect the king of the forest with my life. Take this lethal poison flying silk. Pwah! Long live the king of the forest. Lan Xiaoni slew a 100-legged red spider with a calm expression. I'm the demonic frog guardian. Your journey ends here. Boom, boom, boom. Lan Xiaoni engaged in a fierce battle with a frog wielding a pair of swords. Sword intent swept through the air, and spell techniques clashed, raising the forest within a radius of over a kilometer to the ground. In the end, Lan Xiaoni defeated the demonic frog guardian and sliced its body in half with her water blade. She turned toward Lin with a smug expression, as if to say, "Don't you think I'm bad *SS?" And Lin gave his underling a word of praise. Bad *SS. They then encountered the most powerful boss in the forest, the Greenwood Forest Dragon. And Lin unleashed a sword strike in the blink of an eye, which almost sliced the entire forest in half. The Greenwood Forest Dragon had been insta-killed. Lan Xiaoni had been intimidated by the Greenwood Forest Dragon's terrifying aura, and the battle was over before she even had a chance to unleash her trump card. And Lin stowed away the green jade tree root, with a content expression on his face. He had insta-killed the boss and picked up the luxurious equipment. Lan Xiaoni, the mermaid princess, finally shed tears of indignation. What was the point of her working so hard before? She had thought that she would have a chance to compete for the treasures in this forest. However, the king of the forest had been insta-killed before she even had a *king chance to do anything. Lan Xiaoni's expression was one of despair. She was struck by the horror of being dominated by Lin's power again. She no longer had the confidence to compete with Lin for the treasures. A rush of dizziness struck her. Lin and Lan Xiaoni reappeared in the spacious room. Lin unleashed his divine inspection technique on the green jade tree root with an elated expression. Sea Essence Primordial Wood, a withered sea god tree from the Western Sea. It has survived tens of thousands of years of lightning strikes without being charred. This is a divine rank material that is condensed from the essence of life and lightning. Lin was ecstatic. Another divine rank material. In terms of value, this divine rank material was even more valuable than immortal tools. This *King tomb was clearly giving him free money. Idiots and rich people were not enough to describe this tomb. However, thinking about it, this tomb was where 2 Dao integration stage high priests were buried, so it made sense that there wouldn't be any divine rank treasures here. Furthermore, this tomb was designed for the future soul formation stage prodigies of the Heavenly Turtle Tribe and Spirit Fish Clan. It couldn't just set up a return to Void stage trial for these little cuties to die, could it? Hence, the upper limit for this trial was the hellish difficulty of the soul formation stage at most. What a pity that a hack like Lin, who could even pummel return to Void stage mighty figures, had come to this tomb. Lin could only reluctantly accept all of these treasures. With this in mind, he turned toward Lan Xiaoni and heaved a forlorn sigh. Sigh, this trial is so boring. It's only giving me treasures, and it's only suitable for little cultivators like you. Lan Xiaoni was dumbstruck. She didn't think that Lin would give her such a critical blow. She stared blankly at Lin as tears began to flow from her eyes again. The mermaid princess sobbed. You said this trial is suitable for little cultivators like me. So why don't you let me have some fun? And Lin nodded. Sure, you can fight the monsters in the future, and I'll just pick up some treasures. PFFF. Lan Xiaoni threw up 3 liters of blood. Chapter 1042. Shihaizi's statue spoke again. Congratulations, fated ones. You have successfully passed the green ball of light trial. I hope you can take the treasure with you and revitalize your tribe. And Lin patted his chest. Don't worry, senior. I'll definitely do it. What a familiar phrase. Lan Xiaoni had a mental breakdown. She really wanted to yell, High Priest, are you blind? Your descendant is here. I'm the future of the merfolk tribe. You're giving the treasure to a human. Shihazi silently splayed his hands open, and the ball of light appeared before Enlin and Lan Xiaoni again. They were black, white, blue, and red. Enlin chose red. Lan Xiaoni also chose red with a resigned expression. A gratified smile appeared on Shihazi's face. What a harmonious couple. There's no need for any discussion. However, the man has to be more forgiving and loving to the woman. It's not a good thing to make the woman cry. Enlin was astonished. This B** star knew how to give a friendly reminder like this? Was it really that intelligent? Lan Xiaoni clasped a hand over her heart. She didn't know what words to use to describe her current feelings. The statue standing before her was most likely not a fake high priest. The high priest's mighty and unfathomable image had been completely ruined by this stupid statue. The red ball of light began to radiate outward. They were struck by another rush of dizziness. When the two of them came to their senses, they had already arrived at a plain littered with skeletons. These skeletons were of different shapes and sizes, and it was clear that they had been piled together by countless different living beings. Some of their skeletons were relatively small, like that of a puppy, while others were the skeletons of gargantuan, ferocious beasts. Just their bones alone were several hundred meters, or even over a kilometer long. Enlin walked to the front, and Lan Xiaoni followed behind him in a very natural manner. This seemed to have become a type of tacit understanding. It wasn't until a ferocious wolf skeleton pounced toward Enlin that Enlin realized something was different. The ferocious wolf was unimpeded, and it opened its mouth before biting down on Enlin's head. The ferocious wolf bit down on Enlin's neck, intending to tear his entire head off. Kacha! Accompanied by some kind of cracking sound, the wolf's teeth broke. Enlin coldly snorted, and with a burst of powerful true essence, the vicious wolf's bones began to crack, and in an instant, it turned into ashes. He turned toward Lan Xiaoni with a curious expression. Why aren't you fighting anymore? Weren't these monsters supposed to be enemies for Lan Xiaoni to display her value? Lan Xiaoni's eyes were lifeless, but a smile appeared on her face. I'll help you fight the monsters, and you'll pick up the treasures? Enlin, you can actually fight with me for the boss and the treasure. I really don't mind, Enlin comforted. Lan Xiaoni buried her head in her hands with despair on her face. I just can't beat you. You can slap me to death with a single slap. Would I have to fight with you? Woo-woo. There's no point in me coming here. I can only follow behind you like a fool and watch you take the treasures. I can't do anything. I really don't know why I came to this tomb. The mermaid princess burst into tears again. You're right. Enlin nodded. Then why are you still here? Why don't you go back? Lan Xiaoni faltered slightly upon hearing this, and she stopped crying. Her bright blue eyes widened, and there were still tears flowing down her cheeks. That's right, why don't I go back? I'm going back right now. Slap. Lan Xiaoni's snowy white shoulders were pressed down by Enlin's hands. Their eyes met. Enlin spoke with an earnest expression. No, you can't go back. I know why you're here. What is it? Lan Xiaoni asked with an expectant expression. After you leave, I'll also be judged as an enemy by the tomb. So your value is to stay here and not trigger the tomb's mechanism, so that I can obtain more treasures. Enlin spoke with an excited expression. Lan Xiaoni. Everyone suddenly fell silent. A tragic smile suddenly appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face. Just let me die. Please don't. Enlin immediately tried to stop her, and his mind raced as he tried to think of a way to calm down this mermaid princess. Lan Xiaoni's eyes were red, and her face was filled with tears. She was crying silently, so this was most likely the result of her advanced level of pain. Enlin was extremely concerned. Was Lan Xiaoni made of water? Why did she cry so easily? So be it if she didn't cry, but her tears were still flowing nonstop. If she wanted to give up, Enlin would be targeted by the tomb. Otherwise, why would he care about what the mermaid princess was thinking? He could just toss her to the side. He had to give her hope and reignite her fighting spirit. Got it. Enlin's eyes lit up. Ahem, how about this? I promise you that I won't attack when we encounter a monster with a treasure. I'll attack after a minute. I'll give you a chance to defeat the monster. How about that? And Lin proposed. Really? Lan Xiaoni drew a sharp intake of breath as she stared at Enlin with incredulity on her face. Enlin nodded with a solemn expression. I swear on my integrity. That's great. Thank you for giving me a chance. Lan Xiaoni wrapped her arms around Enlin with excitement. Enlin was caught off guard and taken advantage of. Lan Xiaoni's body was extremely soft, as if she didn't have any bones, and her voluptuous breasts assaulted Enlin's chest, making Enlin's blood boil. Don't even think of using the mermaid trick to covet my beauty. Enlin pushed away the warm, fragrant body in his arms with a serious expression. Get away from me. Your seafood scent is too strong. Lan Xiaoni's chest trembled with rage, and she clenched her fists. However, her rage was overshadowed by excitement and elation in the end. She decided not to bicker with someone like this. She was going to fight for the future of the Spirit Fish clan and fight for the treasures. Lan Xiaoni's body fragrance was actually quite pleasant. It was fresh and elegant, but it was also tinged with a hint of vastness, like the fragrance of flowers on an island. The reason why Enlin said it smelled like seafood was mainly because Lan Xiaoni's fishtail was making him think too much about other things. The two of them continued onward. Lan Xiaoni was extremely motivated, and she dealt with the monsters in high spirits, taking on the role of a lackey. Mr. Enlin, you don't need to do anything. I'll do it. Don't attack him. Crimson Bone Crocodile, I'm your opponent. Ha! A bunch of trash. Come at me together. Lan Xiaoni displayed the poise of a prodigy as she slaughtered all the monsters that she encountered. In Lan Xiaoni's words, killing these monsters was a warm-up for her in preparation for the final boss. Enlin nodded with a smile and offered some comments from time to time. Who wouldn't like such an enthusiastic lackey? Thus, the two of them continued onward toward the place where the aura of death and blood was the most abundant. Neither of them realized that they were slowly becoming more and more out of character. Finally, after a while, Lan Xiaoni had encountered the final monster of her dreams. Chapter 1043. This was a crimson humanoid skeleton with a big head, and it held a bone whip with sharp bone spikes protruding from its hand. And Lin felt like this creature was a little familiar. Cuckoo. The big-headed skeleton cackled menacingly as the whip in its hand lashed through the air toward Lan Xiaoni. Time begins, and Lin silently pressed a stopwatch. Lan Xiaoni's battle intent was extremely high, and she let loose a delicate cry before pouncing toward the big-headed skeleton instead of retreating. She activated the white ball to materialize a wall of ice beside her, and at the same time, she activated the little blue fish, which transformed into a streak of light that crashed directly toward the big-headed skeleton's head. The bone whip clashed with the ice wall, sending ice shards flying through the air. This was one of Lan Xiaoni's trump cards, and it was quite powerful to be able to block an attack from a boss. At this moment, Lan Xiaoni had already activated the little blue fish to ram into the big-headed skeleton's head. The treasure of this world is mine. Lan Xiaoni yelled with excitement on her face. However, right at this moment, a peculiar smile suddenly appeared on the big-headed skeleton's face. Cuckoo. Boom! The big-headed skeleton's head was crushed by the little blue fish. Before Lan Xiaoni had a chance to figure out what the skeleton smile was, a bony fist was already hurtling through the air before striking Lan Xiaoni's pristine, white lower abdomen. Another earth-shattering boom erupted as the shockwave shattered the ground within a radius of over a kilometer. A searing pain shot through Lan Xiaoni's body, and she threw up a mouthful of blood as her body was sent flying back by the immense force. Never would she have thought that the skeleton monster would still be able to move after having its head crushed. A faint smile appeared on Enlin's face upon seeing this. Did she really think he would be so kind as to give Lan Xiaoni a chance to obtain the treasure? There was indeed a chance, but it was very slim. Lan Xiaoni had underestimated the power of world bosses far too much. Enlin could insta-kill world bosses, but that didn't mean that world bosses were weak. One had to realize that even a return to Void stage mighty figure would be fearful of an attack from Enlin. So how could he compare to Lan Xiaoni? A world boss was at least at the soul formation pinnacle stage. How could Lan Xiaoni defeat such a powerful opponent in under a minute? That was impossible. The headless skeleton pounced toward Lan Xiaoni with its bone whip before lashing out again. Pa! Ah! Lan Xiaoni's lower abdomen was struck by the whip, and a bloody gash appeared on her waist. She couldn't care less about her injuries. She immediately urged the little blue fish to defend herself in an attempt to restrain the headless skeleton. The headless skeleton wielded the bone whip with an extremely exquisite technique. It changed the angle of the bone whip at extremely fast speed and swung it toward the little blue fish with tremendous force. The collision of the two caused a loud explosion. The small blue fish was sent flying by the bone whip with an extremely powerful momentum. The headless skeleton gripped the air in Lan Xiaoni's direction. Gotcha! Space suddenly froze, and everything within the range was fixed like a painting. And Lin's heart skipped a beat. This blood-colored headless skeleton had actually used a spatial seal. The skeleton's overall combat prowess was slightly more powerful than the previous two, but it was still only at the soul formation pinnacle stage. If it unleashed its full power, it could unleash an attack comparable to that of a rookie return to void stage mighty figure. However, it was unreasonable for them to use spatial spells in a place like this. The headless skeleton's laughter reverberated through the air. The bone whip suddenly froze, and its edges became extremely sharp as it transformed into a long bone saber. It stepped forward and quickly approached the immobilized Lan Xiaoni with the bone saber in its hand. An expression of despair appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face. She still had many trump cards and mystic techniques that she hadn't used, but now that the space around her had been frozen, she didn't even have a chance to resist. Was this the end? The crimson bone saber slashed through the air, leaving a crimson trail of death in its wake. Lan Xiaoni was very indignant, and she wanted to cry. However, she didn't even have the right to cry in this spatial seal. The bone saber fell. A figure suddenly appeared before her and blocked the bone saber with an inky black longsword. Boom! A violent collision swept his hair into the air. The man knocked the bone saber aside at an extremely fast speed before unleashing a boundless sword projection. An inky black sword projection engulfed heaven and earth as it sliced the headless skeleton in half. The skeleton didn't even have a chance to react before his life force was severed. Another insta-kill. Lan Xiaoni stared blankly at the figure. And Lin, tears welled up in the mermaid princess' eyes as her emotions welled up. This was different from the despair she felt when she saw Lin insta-kill the boss. This time, a certain chord in her heart was tugged at by Lin's insta-kill. She was beyond touched. Lan Xiaoni had been following this figure ever since she entered the tomb. No matter what dangers they encountered, she felt as if there was nothing to be afraid of as long as he was there. This figure was so reliable, and he gave her an indescribable feeling. Lan Xiaoni, I didn't keep my promise. You won't blame me for waiting for a minute, right? Lin didn't turn around, and he spoke in a gentle voice. Yes, I don't blame you. Thank you, Lin. I was too stubborn. Tears flowed from Lan Xiaoni's eyes as she spoke with both gratitude and self-reproach. Lin nodded. I'll go buy a few oranges. Stay here and don't move. Okay. Lan Xiaoni nodded obediently. What oranges? She came to her senses and turned to look at Lin with confusion in her eyes. Lin made his way over to the shattered bones and pulled out a red bone before putting it away into his storage ring with elation on his face. Lan Xiaoni. For some reason, she felt a little less touched. Heaven and earth spun around them. The two of them returned to the statue of Shihaizi. The statue of Shihaizi spoke again. Congratulations, fated ones, on successfully passing the trial of the red ball of light. I hope you can take the treasures with you to revitalize your tribe. Lin patted his chest. Don't worry, Senior, I'll definitely do it. A smile appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face as she looked at Lin. Here, these are oranges, the supreme oranges produced in the southern Heavenly Wing Nation. They're quite delicious. Lin tossed 2 oranges that were about the size of watermelons toward Lan Xiaoni. His underling had worked hard to clear out the monsters, so as the big brother, he naturally had to give them some benefits. This was the way of managing others, and Lin was naturally not going to forget this. Lan Xiaoni hugged the oranges in her arms and was at a complete loss for what to do for an instant. She didn't know whether it was because the oranges were too big or because Lin had suddenly given her a present. For some reason, a peculiar feeling welled up in her heart. Thank you, Lan Xiaoni said in a faint voice. These were 2 ninth-grade spirit fruits. As a princess who lived in the Sea Heart Palace for many years, they weren't all that valuable, but she still carefully stowed them away. This was her labor fee, so it was quite significant. If all of the treasures in the tomb were taken by Lin, and she came out empty-handed, if the high priest and her father asked her about the treasures in the tomb, she could still give them 2 large oranges. Chapter 1044. That's right, Lan Xiaoni was already prepared to receive nothing. Anyone would be struck by despair in the face of Lin's monstrous power. Lin used his divine inspection technique to appraise the red bone in his hand. Bone of the Dead Emperor, a Dao integration stage divine monster. This is the essential Dao bone of the West Sea Dead Emperor. It contains an extremely powerful intent realm and essential power of death, and is a divine rank material. Lin's hand trembled slightly as he held the bone. F***CK. Even a Dao integration stage Dao bone appeared. Another divine rank material. A bold idea suddenly appeared in his mind. He had obtained 3 divine rank materials in a row up to this point. If there were also divine rank materials later on, would he be able to use these materials to forge a divine rank weapon? A divine rank weapon. Lin was extremely excited at this thought. This was a feasible idea. The Shi Heizi statue released another ball of light. This time, there were only 3 balls of light, black, white, and blue. 2 faded ones. You can continue to challenge us and obtain the treasures we left behind. Lin thought about it for a moment before choosing the blue ball of light. Lan Xiaoni obediently chose the blue ball of light as well. A gratified smile appeared on the Shi Heizi statue's face. What a harmonious couple. There's no need for any discussion. The man is even giving a gift to the woman, which is very beneficial to their relationship. Lin looked at the crazed statue and repressed the urge to lash out at it. Why was this statue talking so much nonsense? It even had a gossipy expression on its face. Was it poisonous? If it weren't for the fact that it was a statue that could only speak, Lin couldn't be bothered to deal with it. If it weren't for the fact that it was a statue that could only speak, it would have most likely been reduced to dust already. The blue ball of light expanded and enshrouded the 2 of them. Space warped and transformed. An extremely terrifying pressure suddenly swept toward them. Lin's expression shifted, and he instinctively used his vital energy to protect his body. Lan Xiaoni seemed to be accustomed to this kind of pressure. Not only did she not need to unleash any spell techniques to defend herself, but she also felt very comfortable. A glimmer of light flashed through her blue eyes as she said in surprise, "We've come to the deep sea. This time, we're in the underwater world?" Lin glanced at the pitch-black surroundings and the powerful water pressure that was constantly assaulting him. He nodded and said, "Looks like we're at the bottom of the sea. Judging from the pressure, it should be at least 50,000 meters deep, right?" Lan Xiaoni nodded. "About 53,060 meters. She was a mermaid, so she was more sensitive to the ocean." Lan Xiaoni pointed in a certain direction as she spoke. "Then, the power of water there is more powerful. Can we go there and have a look?" Looking at the mermaid princess who didn't have any backbone even at the bottom of the sea, Lin couldn't help but find it funny. He nodded and said, "Let's go." Lin swam toward the direction that Lan Xiaoni was pointing in, and he encountered a few deep-sea monsters along the way. However, all of them were taken care of by Lan Xiaoni, and he didn't even get a chance to approach them. Lin could sense that Lan Xiaoni's powers had improved in all aspects in the deep sea, and it looked like this was also a result of the environment. After traveling for a short while, a white palace began to appear in their field of vision. The dome was made of white jade, and it was supported by stone pillars with divine fish engravings on them. It was pristine, flawless, and extremely beautiful. Could it be that the final treasure-wielding monster is in the palace? Unlin's interest was piqued, and he immediately pushed open the palace gate. However, what he didn't expect was that the scene behind the gate was completely different. A blue restrictive barrier appeared in front of him, and ripples spread out from it. Within the barrier was a single plank bridge that extended into the distance. There was a vast expanse of unfathomable darkness all around. There were circular hovering plates on either side of the palace, upon which stood a few dozen sea monsters of different appearances, all of which were wielding weapons. The depth of this palace doesn't make sense. Unlin was a little surprised. From the outside, the palace was only around 1,000 feet in size at most. However, just the bridge alone was over 10,000 feet in length. Perhaps this palace is also an independent mystic realm. Lan Xiaoni made her way forward, and she seemed to have sensed something as she laid a hand on the blue barrier. However, she found that the barrier was like a curtain of water, and she passed right through it. Is this a wall of water? And Lin was quite intrigued, and he also made his way toward the barrier. Boom! And Lin's body was plastered against the barrier, and he was knocked back a couple of steps by the massive force. Lan Xiaoni turned to look at Enlin with confusion on her face. An expression of confusion appeared on Enlin's face. He launched a fist toward the barrier. Boom! Enlin was knocked back a few steps by a massive force, but the barrier remained completely unscathed. Lan Xiaoni's eyes widened. You can't come in? Enlin took a deep breath as a white light flashed through his eyes. Divine inspection technique. A terrifyingly dense array of energy appeared before his eyes, stacking on top of one another to form an indestructible barrier. Enlin was astonished. This was not some spell formation. This was a collection of energy. This was a pure defensive spell technique, so there was no way he could take advantage of it. Lan Xiaoni's eyes gradually lit up at the sight of Enlin's distressed expression. Could it be that only those with noble blood like mine have the right to enter this place? Enlin's expression darkened. Please watch your language. Lan Xiaoni smiled for the first time. Her smile was as vibrant as a flower, and she was extremely elated. Ha ha! Even Enlin would have such a day like this. This is fate. She placed her hands on her hips and looked at Enlin with an extremely smug expression. This time, the treasure is mine. After waiting for so long, I finally have a chance to turn the tables. High Priest, Father, Big Brother, Little Brother, and all of the Spirit Fish Clan brethren, I have not let you down. I, Lan Xiaoni, have done it. Ha ha! Ha ha! Lan Xiaoni laughed heartily and even began to hum a Spirit Fish Clan song. Us commoners are so happy today. La 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 la. And Lin stared at the woman before him with astonishment on his face. Has she gone insane? Just how much grievance had she been holding back for her to be able to laugh so happily? Lan Xiaoni laughed for a long while before finally feeling satisfied, and she waved a hand at Enlin. Enlin, this is fate. I'm going to go now. I won't be holding back on this treasure. Bye-bye. Lan Xiaoni turned to Enlin as she spoke. Enlin wore a resigned expression. He couldn't think of a way out of this situation. This was not a soul formation stage or return to void stage barrier. Instead, it was a Dao integration stage barrier. In other words, this was something that the High Priest of the Spirit Fish Clan had designed in order to open a backdoor for his juniors. From a certain perspective, Lan Xiaoni was right when she said that he had a noble bloodline. What could Enlin do? He was also in despair. However, Enlin still had a sliver of hope. A faint smile appeared on his face as he looked at Lan Xiaoni's departing figure. Chapter 1045. An earth-shattering boom erupted as the little blue fish clashed with a silver trident. Jita nodded with a smile. I'll naturally give you the treasure you want, princess. Water formation wall. Lan Xiaoni let loose a clear cry as a barrier constructed from divine water appeared before her. Lan Xiaoni screamed as her body plummeted from the sky, and Lin's eyes widened with incredulity. Spatial seal. Azure snake. Jida waved his left hand through the air, and over 100 tiny blue snakes imbued with the extremely pure power of water pounced toward Lan Xiaoni. At the same time, he stabbed his silver trident toward the little blue fish. The silver trident struck the water barrier, upon which an extremely dazzling light flashed. And Lin was astonished. So the reason why Lan Xiaoni was angry was because of his looks? Lan Xiaoni was also given a huge fright, and the little blue fish almost fell to the ground. Lan Xiaoni placed her hands on her hips. "Hurry up and kneel before me and offer up your treasure. Perhaps I'll be happy and spare your life if you do that." The most important thing to obtain a treasure was power. "I'll use my power to prove that this treasure is destined to be mine." "Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself? How dare you propose to me when you're so ugly?" The mermaid princess activated the little blue fish and the white ball at the same time to attack Jida. This was a spatial countermeasure trump card that could ignore the enemy's spatial seal. Lan Xiaoni's eyes widened with incredulity as she stared at the octopus monster before her. The little blue fish transformed into a bolt of lightning before crashing toward Jida's back. Spatial flow. Lan Xiaoni tossed out a talisman before she even landed on the ground. Soon, her expression brightened, and she chortled with glee. "Ha ha! Lin, do you see that? This is fate's choice. This treasure can only belong to me." Couldn't she Heisey just toss the treasure to Lan Xiaoni if he wanted to open the back door so badly? And Lin promised that he wouldn't say a single word. All of the sea monsters knelt down to greet their regal princess. The octopus monster stood up from its throne before extending a slight bow toward Lan Xiaoni with a smile. "My beautiful princess, welcome to the Solitary Wood Palace. I am Jida." Lan Xiaoni was ecstatic. She didn't think that her method of forcefully demanding treasures would actually work. In that case, she would be able to live up to everyone's expectations and bring back some of her ancestors' inheritances. At this moment, Jida had already charged toward Lan Xiaoni, and his silver trident pierced through space toward Lan Xiaoni. The energy of the silver trident exploded, and the water array wall was broken. Hualala, why bother with the trial of the light ball? Even the sirens were worshipping this salted fish. Would the final boss kneel on the ground and beg this salted fish to cut off its head? Asterisk crack. Asterisk everything in the area stopped moving. Taking advantage of Jida's momentary daze, Lan Xiaoni unleashed all of her power to activate the little blue fish behind Jida as she retreated. Lan Xiaoni turned around and glared at Lin before letting out a cold harumph and continuing onward. What else could Lin say? He had no choice but to kneel in front of this invincible backdoor entrant. Lan Xiaoni activated the white ball to unleash a series of silvery white ice swords to slice through Jida's little snake. "Silly girl, did you really think?" Her brows furrowed slightly. This wooden bridge didn't look as long as it did. There was some kind of concealment spell technique that made it impossible to see the end of the bridge. This salted fish was very smug. "Go to hell. The treasures are mine." Ha ha ha. Lan Xiaoni felt like she was floating in the air at the sight of Lin's enraged expression. All of the frustrations in her heart had been resolved, and she hummed a song as she made her way toward the end of the wooden bridge. Boom. What did you say? "If you marry me, everything here will be yours." Jida pointed at every part of the palace as he looked at Lan Xiaoni with a scorching gaze. "I can smell your fragrance, and I can sense your beautiful appearance. I can sense your bloodline, and I can only look up to it. I want you." She flew toward the wooden bridge just like that, and a power that restricted flight suddenly descended. There was a golden throne at the end of the wooden bridge. There was a monster with dark golden skin on the throne. It had the head of an octopus and the body of a human, and it was holding a silvery white trident in its hand. Boom. Jida's explosive power was already comparable to that of a rookie return to Void Stage mighty figure. Boundless power erupted from the tip of the trident, and the little blue fish was knocked flying. This sentence was like a bolt of lightning that struck Lan Xiaoni like a bolt of lightning. And Lin was just about to enjoy the show when an extremely shocking scene unfolded. The sea monsters' voices were extremely loud and clear. However, a mysterious smile suddenly appeared on Jita's face, and a hint of greed flashed through his eyes as he looked at Lan Xiaoni. Princess, the prerequisite is that you have to marry me and become my woman. Ever since the concealment spell technique had been dispelled, Lin had also witnessed the scenes unfolding before his eyes. He was slightly dumbstruck. He didn't think that things would develop like this. Terrifying shockwaves erupted forth for over a kilometer, but they were unable to destroy the wooden bridge. It looked like the wooden bridge was made of some special materials. She had to say those words now. She had no choice but to wiggle her tail and slowly walk forward. You're courting death. Lin, F*CK off. All of the sea monsters suddenly half-knelt on the wooden bridge and lowered their heads. We pay our respects to Princess Spirit Fish. The talismans burned in the air before casting a layer of light over her body. However, they would probably say those words. The sea monsters on both sides of the bridge suddenly opened their eyes at this moment, and they raised the weapons in their hands as extremely powerful auras erupted from their bodies. The mermaid princess was naturally aware of this as well, so she had already activated the white ball and the little blue fish to protect herself before the sea monsters had a chance to do anything. Lan Xiaoni finally exploded, and a powerful force erupted forth, blasting through the air around her. F*CK. I'm treating you guys as enemies, and you're bowing down to me? And Lin looked on at Lan Xiaoni's departing figure with a buoyant smile. Be careful, underling Lan. Don't die on the bridge. Lan Xiaoni didn't really care that her boss was only saluting instead of kneeling down. She extended a slender hand. Jita, give me your treasures, and I'll leave. Lan Xiaoni continued onward, and the end of the wooden bridge suddenly appeared before her. Boom! This was most likely the final boss of this level. I'll make you fall in love with me. I'm ugly, but you'll be mesmerized by my soul. The octopus monster pounced toward Lan Xiaoni with a scorching light in its eyes, and its tentacles wriggled incessantly, clearly very excited. Lan Xiaoni gritted her teeth, and a brilliant light erupted from her body as she retreated in an extremely agile manner, escaping from Jita's spatial seal. Lan Xiaoni's battle with the big-headed skeleton was a clear example of how difficult it was to kill the boss in the light ball world. Whether or not she could defeat, it was another matter entirely. How could this be? Jita's expression shifted. You think you're going to get the treasures if I don't go in? Lan Xiaoni was already prepared for this, and she let loose a clear cry before unleashing a defensive spell technique. Lan Xiaoni's body was blasted back toward the wooden bridge behind her. Jita extended his dark golden left hand and gripped the air as he spoke. Chapter 1046. On the other hand, Jita was gaining the upper hand. Boom! At this moment, for some reason, she suddenly thought of that figure. That was an unforgettable figure that gave her a sense of security. Even in Lin's expression shifted slightly upon seeing that terrifying power. The fist was imbued with terrifying power, and even the space around it crumbled. Soon, she broke through the barrier of blue ripples without any resistance and pounced toward Lin like a swallow. Save me, Papa, she yelled in her sweet voice. And Lin was astonished. To think that a member of the Spirit Fish clan can unleash such pure dragon power. Stop her! Jita roared from behind Lan Xiaoni. Boom! And Lin. Jita only managed to stop his retreat after smashing his throne into smithereens. His blood didn't splatter. Instead, it swirled around his snowy white arms in a spiral. Child's play. Jita clapped his hands together, and the blizzard was shattered. Damn it! I can't lose here. Are you kidding me? This was the first time he had heard such a refreshing reply. Daddy, save me! Lan Xiaoni yelled. A terrifying collision erupted, accompanied by a special hissing sound of cracking. However, Lin had no intention of helping her. A mocking expression appeared on his face. Wouldn't it be very embarrassing for me to help you now that you're asking me to help you? His arms were already empty, but his body squirmed as his dark golden body slowly shrank. In its place, a pair of arms slowly grew out. He took the initiative to attack Lan Xiaoni again as he spoke. Unlin, snowstorm formation. A powerful spell technique engulfed the entire bridge. Lan Xiaoni's face became paler and paler, and she was clearly on the brink of exhaustion. You don't have to fight me, His expression shifted drastically as he crossed his arms in front of him. It crashed into Jita's back, and a fearsome shockwave erupted. A vicious expression appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face as she retreated, and she sliced open her wrist. At this moment, it saw the mermaid princess, who was so aggressive just a moment ago, turn around and run. Unlin, several dozen sea monsters on either side of the bridge suddenly sprang into action before unleashing spell techniques toward Lan Xiaoni. Did it work? Not long after the battle, she was surrounded by danger. 2 bloody wounds appeared on her snow-white arms, and a bloody wound appeared on her slender fishtail, which was glowing with a blue light. One had to know that kid was defenseless. The opportunity to receive an attack was not easy to come by. Was it really okay to admit it so directly? Outside the barrier, Unlin was speechless when he saw this scene. Cough, cough. That's right, Lan Xiaoni immediately activated her escape mode. An earth-shattering dragon roar erupted, and a vast divine might shook the heavens and earth. It's called Papa. Unlin chuckled. Rumble. An extremely powerful crimson light erupted from Lan Xiaoni's arm. Why now? Do you still want to fight? I'll accompany you any time. Lan Xiaoni was not elated in the slightest. Unlin chuckled coldly. Which idiot was the one who said that only those with noble blood could enter and that the treasures belong to you? Is this the choice of fate? Unlin, save me. She squeezed her body into her arms as if she were squeezing dough. The white ball was responsible for defending against the sea monster's attacks, while the little blue fish was responsible for keeping Kid occupied. Lan Xiaoni's escape was extremely arduous. Kid didn't think that Lan Xiaoni would have the power to break free from his spatial seal. Just as he was feeling astonished, the little blue fish had already crashed into his body. Lan Xiaoni was quite powerful and had trump cards like the little blue fish and the white bead, but it was still too much for her to handle a rookie return to Void Stage Mighty Figure. Kid let loose a wail of anguish. His extremely sturdy dark golden arms were shattered by Lan Xiaoni's punch, and his body was sent flying backward by the fearsome force of the punch. It's me. I'm that idiot. Tears of remorse flowed from Lan Xiaoni's eyes. That spirit fish divine blood mystic technique, fish dragon dance, had expended almost all of her energy, but she was still unable to kill Kid. How was she going to fight now? After unleashing that mystic technique, Lan Xiaoni's aura was extremely feeble, and she panted heavily as she stared intently at Kid. A sinister smile appeared on Kid's face as the feelers on his chin slid through the air. He even hooked his feelers at Lan Xiaoni, as if he was flirting with her. A blue figure leaped out from the explosion of energy. Her long, black hair danced behind her as a suit of ice blue armor appeared over her jade-like skin. After landing on the ground, she continued to rush toward Enlin. Lan Xiaoni's tail whipped through the air, and she closed in instead of retreating. She clenched her right hand into a fist, and a crimson divine dragon seemed to have appeared on her arm as she lashed out like a dragon. Boom! All types of negative emotions began to well up in her heart. I know you're not my father, so I'll just coax you a little. Lan Xiaoni twisted her body and evaded Kid's attack by a hair's breadth. Lan Xiaoni suddenly let loose a delicate cry, and she waved her hand through the air. Countless splashes of water transformed into a blizzard imbued with killing intent that swept toward Kid. Lan Xiaoni's body trembled with disgust, horror, and helplessness. Lan Xiaoni glowered at Kid, and she waved her hand to summon back the little blue fish. She retreated as she fought, and it was clear that she was already on the back foot. Don't you feel any shame or guilt? Enlin was astonished. The boss was blatantly trying to take Lan Xiaoni for himself. Wasn't that a crime? Why didn't he consider the spectators' feelings? Kid waved his silver trident through the air, and a silver blade projection several hundred meters in length shot toward Lan Xiaoni with each strike. How could this be? Was this mermaid princess afraid of death to this extent? And Lin, she had initially planned to puncture Kid's body in one go, but to her surprise, the little blue fish's full-force attack was only able to inflict a minor injury on Kid. Jita's back caved in from the impact, and his body flew toward Lan Xiaoni amid the sound of bones and flesh exploding. He threw up a mouthful of green blood at the same time. What do you want? Lan Xiaoni's tail was almost punctured by Kid's harpoon, and she ran even faster. Kid wasn't enraged by Lan Xiaoni's attack. Instead, he chortled with glee. You're quite bold, I like it. However, I'm stronger than you can imagine. You won't be able to defeat me, so just submit to me. The little blue fish's momentum made even the air tremble. This is my best chance. I can't lose. Kid coughed up a few mouthfuls of blood and stood up with great difficulty. That was close. If you had struck me in the heart, I might have died. Kid's aura soared explosively as he looked at Lan Xiaoni, and it looked like he could still fight. Lan Xiaoni retreated a few steps with despair on her face. Spirit Fish Divine Blood Mystic Technique, Fish Dragon Dance. Ha ha! Stop resisting. If you want to resist, resist in bed. Chapter 1047. You have to pay for what you've done. Lan Xiaoni finally understood the meaning of this sentence. That's right. She didn't have a chance to gloat for long. She then pounced toward Enlin like a salted fish, trying to grab onto Enlin's thigh tightly. The blue rippling barrier clearly didn't have any effect on the sea monsters, and Jita also chased after Lan Xiaoni as he charged out. Don't block the way. Enlin wrapped his left arm around Lan Xiaoni's soft and warm waist and flung her to the side. At this moment, Jita's silver trident was already hurtling toward him with a terrifying power. Enlin didn't even have time to draw his sword, so he grabbed toward the silver trident with his bare hands. Boom! Terrifying energy exploded forth, and the silver trident was caught by Enlin with his bare hands. The peerlessly sharp trident was unable to even pierce through Enlin's skin. Jita's eyes widened. How is this possible? Enlin's lips curled up into a slight smile. I'm also very frustrated. I'm always so bad *SS that you guys think it's impossible, but this is the reality. His voice had only just fallen when Enlin's other fist had already lashed out. This fist was aimed directly at Jita's chest. There were no spell techniques or energy fluctuations emanating from it, and it was purely a counterattack using the power of his physical body. However, Jita could sense a power that was comparable to Lan Xiaoni's final mystic technique. There was no time to evade. Boom! A massive hole was punched into Jita's sturdy dark golden body. PFFF. Jita threw up a mouthful of blood as his body flew back. The octopus monster crashed into the rippling barrier and tumbled onto the wooden bridge. Enlin unleashed another bolt of golden void lightning toward it. The golden void lightning tore through the air toward the octopus monster. Boom! The bolt of golden lightning exploded upon contact with the rippling barrier. Enlin, F*CK. I forgot about this F*King racist barrier. Who would have thought that it could even completely isolate external spells? What was the point of fighting? Gid was lying on the ground with serious injuries. When he saw that Enlin could not take the next step, he finally laughed. Haha, so what if you're powerful? If you can't cross this barrier, I'll always be the man you can't get. The corner of Enlin's mouth twitched. It was one thing for him to look disgusting, but why did he have to say those words to disgust him? Suddenly, a blue figure crossed the barrier, holding an azure ice blade, and slashed at Kid, who was heavily injured and lying on the ground. This slash seemed to have exhausted all of the woman's strength, and its power was extremely terrifying. No! Jita screamed as his body was cut in half by the ice blade. Enlin couldn't cross this barrier, but Lan Xiaoni could. Lan Xiaoni's ice blade dissipated, and her features were extremely pale. Her body swayed slightly, as if she was about to collapse to the ground from exhaustion, but she forcibly stabilized herself. She bent her fishtail, slowly squatted down, and touched Kid's body. Enlin, he was very familiar with killing a boss and looting the corpse. After all, He had always done this before. However, the roles were reversed this time. Lan Xiaoni was the final winner, and Enlin could only look on helplessly from the sidelines. Enlin's expression was filled with despair. Was this fate? After so many twists and turns, he still missed out on this treasure. His dream of forging a divine tool seemed to be even further away. Lan Xiaoni pulled out a treasure that resembled a blue teardrop. The treasure exuded a gentle glow, and it didn't appear to be a priceless treasure. However, Lan Xiaoni could sense a boundless power from it, as if it were a boundless ocean. A satisfied smile appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face, and she gripped the blue teardrop treasure tightly in her hand before walking out of the barrier. I won. Lan Xiaoni waved the blue teardrop in her hand triumphantly as she looked at Enlin. Enlin shook his head and heaved a forlorn sigh. Perhaps this is fate. This blue ball of light world was simply destined to deliver a treasure to Lan Xiaoni. Everything had been King set in stone. So what could Enlin say? A fragrant aroma wafted toward him. Enlin raised his head to discover that a pair of slender hands had appeared before him, holding a blue teardrop. The light was gentle and tranquil, and it was extremely soothing. He turned to look at the woman before him with astonishment on his face. An extremely righteous smile appeared on Lan Xiaoni's deathly pale features. I, Lan Xiaoni, am a very grateful person. I'll give this teardrop to you as repayment for saving my life. Enlin was completely dumbstruck. Lan Xiaoni was gifting him a divine rank material. This turn of events was far too sudden, and he was struggling to accept it. Lan Xiaoni's ecstatic expression after learning that she had a chance to obtain a treasure was still vivid in Enlin's mind. A treasure left behind by an ancestor was extremely important to her. It was very likely that this was the only treasure she had a chance to obtain on this trip. However, she was willing to hand over a treasure that she had obtained after countless trials and tribulations. Boy, what are you waiting for? If you don't want it, I'll keep it for myself. Lan Xiaoni snapped in a clear voice. I want it. I want it. Enlin accepted the treasure with a grateful expression on his face. Thank you, you're such a good girl. Lan Xiaoni, is that a compliment? Enlin came to his senses and corrected himself. You're the most talented spirit fish clan cultivator I've ever seen. A smug smile appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face. Of course, she's so easy to please, Enlin thought to himself. After the treasure was taken, the feeling of heaven and earth transforming swept over them again. The space around them warped, and the two of them appeared before Shihaizi's statue again. Congratulations on passing the trial of the blue ball of light, fated ones. I hope you could take the treasure with you and use it to revitalize your tribe. Shihaizi's voice sounded again. Enlin patted his chest with a content expression. Don't worry, senior, I will. This scene had repeated itself countless times, and it was a cycle that struck despair into their hearts. Lan Xiaoni felt a little suffocated, and her face paled even further. She had overexerted herself after using a mystic technique, so she could only swallow a blood spirit pill. At this moment, a hand extended toward her. There was a red fruit exuding extremely powerful life force fluctuations on the palm of the hand, and one could tell that it was an extraordinary fruit. This is a third-rank immortal fruit, the dark blood fruit. There's only one left, so eat it. It has extremely powerful energy recovery properties. Enlin smiled warmly. Why? Lan Xiaoni's eyes were filled with incredulity as she stared at the crimson fruit in her hand. You're my underling, so how are you going to fight if you don't recover? Eat it. You're welcome. Big Boss doesn't lack money. Enlin spoke in a forthright manner. Lan Xiaoni's hands trembled as she picked up the dark blood fruit before slowly gnawing on it. Tears flowed down her face as she ate. This was the feeling of being treated with kindness after making a huge sacrifice. A faint smile appeared on Enlin's face upon seeing Lan Xiaoni's expression. Wow, underling recruitment plan was a great success. What if a similar situation like the blue light ball world appeared in the light ball world that would leave him dumbfounded? Judging from this silly fish's impression of him, There should be some room for maneuver, right? That's right. Maintaining a good relationship with underlings was a must for a big brother. Underling Lan's heart had clearly been won over by his dark blood fruit, and Lin brought out the blue tear fruit and activated his divine inspection technique. A tear of love. The final tear shed by High Priest Shihizi due to love. Divine rank material. And Lin, what the hell? Chapter 1048. His divine inspection technique seemed to have identified something extraordinary. A drop of sentimental tears? The blue liquid in his hand really was a tear? Tears could become divine rank materials? And Lin stared at the tear in his hand with incredulity on his face. Moments later, he looked up at the statue of Shihizi with curiosity on his face. He really wanted to know what kind of love story could make Shihizi shed such a valuable tear. It was a pity that Guyu had offered to tell him about Shihizi and Tianqinji, but he had refused. And Lin, what are you thinking about? Lan Xiaoni asked upon seeing Lin's expression. Please add the word Big Boss after my name. And Lin replied with a solemn expression. All right, Big Boss and Lin. Lan Xiaoni nodded readily. She had eaten the dark blood fruit, and her energy was quickly recovering. She was in a very good mood, so she didn't want to argue with Lin. And Lin stroked the blue tear. I'm very curious about the story between Shihizi and Tianqinji. How much do you know? That. A reminiscent expression appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face. However, before she had a chance to say anything, the black and white balls of light floated toward the two of them. Fated ones, you can choose a light ball world to continue searching for the treasures we left behind. The statue of Shihizi interjected. Wait. And Lin waved a hand before turning to Lan Xiaoni. Continue. Oh, we have to start with, Lan Xiaoni didn't even get a chance to finish her sentence before the statue of Shihizi interjected again. If you don't choose the light ball world, I'll put away all the light balls, and our trip to the tomb will be over. And Lan Xiaoni, and Lin turned his gaze toward the statue. Why did this statue seem to be in such a hurry? Could it be that it was feeling ashamed after seeing Lan Xiaoni recount its past? My God, wasn't it something similar to a puppet NPC or something? Why does it have such emotions? Then I choose this one. And Lin pointed at the white ball. Lan Xiaoni obediently pointed at the white ball. The world spun again. When their vision became clear again, the two of them were already in the clouds. In front of him was an endless stretch of white clouds. Stepping on them was soft like a sponge. All around him was a vast and deep blue sky. It was extremely clean and connected with the white clouds in the distance. This world seemed to only have these two colors. Amidst the simplicity, there was a sense of loneliness and distance. Thankfully, there's no one here to bother us. Hurry up and tell me about Shihizi and Tianqinji. And Lin turned toward Lan Xiaoni with a gossipy expression. A blush appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face upon seeing the scorching light in Lin's eyes. I actually don't know much. I've only heard a few seniors mention them to me. In ancient times, an extremely terrifying fiend celestial appeared in the West Sea. He was known as the ancient heavenly fiend celestial. At the time, our spirit fish clan was forced into retreat by the ancient heavenly fiend celestial. Most of the West Sea has become the territory of the ancient heavenly fiend celestial. Finally, one day, the ancient heavenly fiend celestial tried to eradicate our spirit fish clan in one fell swoop. At the time, his army even reached the Sea Heart Palace. The ancient heavenly fiend celestial was simply too powerful. Even High Priest Shihizi and the clan leader were no match for him. Just as the Spirit Fish clan was on the brink of extinction, the Heavenly Turtle tribe, which had always been in seclusion, finally appeared. The two West Sea powers joined forces and finally defeated the ancient Heavenly Fiend Celestial's army. High Priest Tianqinji of the Heavenly Turtle tribe was as dazzling as the sun during that battle, and she left a deep impression in the hearts of all the living beings of the Spirit Fish clan. High Priest Shihizi fell in love with Tianqinji at first sight. After that, he relentlessly pursued her, pursued her, and failed. Lan Xiaoni seemed to be a little embarrassed at this point, and she turned her head to look up at the clouds with a melancholic expression, as if she didn't have the face to continue. And Lin was astonished. A handsome mermaid pursuing a female turtle? Was it that inspirational? Both the Spirit Fish clan and the Heavenly Turtle tribe objected to this marriage. The Spirit Fish clan felt that it was absurd for such a handsome high priest to marry a turtle. The Heavenly Turtle tribe also looked down on Shihaizi. They said that the high priest didn't even have a portable turtle shell house. So where did he get the courage to pursue Tian Qingji? However, Shihaizi never gave up. For some reason, after Shihaizi pursued her for several hundred years, Tian Qingji accepted Shihaizi's pursuit. She accepted this love that was beyond the comprehension of the secular world. Lan Xiaoni couldn't help but chuckle. To be honest, I've even imagined the scene of Shihaizi and Tian Qingji getting married. It would definitely be fun. And Lin nodded in agreement. That would definitely be a very beautiful scene. However, the ancient heavenly fiend celestial made a comeback, and the West Sea was once again embroiled in a devastating battle. In order to slay the ancient heavenly fiend celestial, Senior Shihaizi and Senior Tian Qingji sacrificed the last of their lives to slay the ancient heavenly fiend celestial, and they discovered an astonishing secret. This was a secret that could change the fate of both tribes. However, they felt that it wasn't time to tell their brethren about this secret. So the two of them were buried together at the bottom of the ocean and placed everything within the tomb, waiting for the fated one to open what they had left behind. The secret of this tomb was clearly a family matter between the Spirit Fish clan and the Heavenly Turtle tribe. Never would I have thought that the Heavenly Turtle tribe would entrust all of their hopes to a human like you. Lan Xiaoni turned to Enlin with her blue eyes after she finished speaking, and there was a hint of pride and confidence that stemmed from her racial superiority. Enlin smiled. I also never would I have thought that the Spirit Fish clan would entrust all of their hopes to you. Underling Lan, I'm not trying to pick on you. Truth be told, without me, this tomb would be over for you. Lan Xiaoni. His words punctured Lan Xiaoni's pride like a balloon. She instantly deflated with a loud thump. Let's go, Underling Lan. Let's see where the treasures of this world are. Enlin was quite satisfied after listening to Lan Xiaoni's story. Even though he still didn't know the story behind the tears, he had at least gained a rough understanding of Shihaizi. To be able to relentlessly pursue a female turtle for several hundred years, he had to be a badass. The two of them didn't walk this time. Instead, they flew. There were no obstructions, so flying was naturally the fastest. And Lin unleashed his divine sense to survey their surroundings, but he didn't discover anything special. This was quite a headache. There were no special areas or abnormal energy, which meant that there were no clues. They could only be like headless flies, randomly choosing a direction and hurrying on their way. White clouds covered the sky, and the sky was clear as day. Thus, they flew for an hour, covering a distance of over 5,000 kilometers. In the end, there was still nothing. Not even a single life form was to be found, let alone some small monsters. And Lin fell into a daze as he looked around at the empty heaven and earth. Chapter 1049. Boundless. When would it reach the end? What was most frustrating wasn't that there were many monsters along the way, or that the environment was extremely harsh. Instead, it was that there was nothing they could do along the way. Big Boss and Lin, I feel like this place is a little strange. Lan Xiaoni couldn't help but speak up as she trailed behind Lin. And Lin rolled his eyes and snapped. Aren't you just spouting *T? But I just want to spout nonsense. This place is so empty and scary. Lan Xiaoni looked around with a nervous expression, fearful that a life-threatening danger would suddenly appear. And Lin, sometimes, the more peaceful a place was, the more unsettling it was. She was afraid that it would explode at any moment. Let's continue onward. I refuse to believe that this place is infinitely large. And Lin spoke in a firm voice. Lan Xiaoni nodded and continued to follow behind Lin. Whenever she was feeling uneasy, she would look at the white-robed figure in front of her. She would feel slightly more at ease just by looking at his reliable back. So what if her enemies were powerful? Big Boss and Lin could crush them with a single punch. The two of them continued onward through the boundless sea of clouds. 1 hour, 2 hours, 12 hours. One day, there was still nothing. There was still nothing. And Lin silently halted his brick kinesis flight with a solemn expression. Impossible. How could a ball of light world be so big? Lan Xiaoni scratched her head. After all, every ball of light world has different characteristics. If we flew at full speed for the past few days, we could have circled the Earth several times. Even if we lined up all the dishes that the entire human race ate, it wouldn't be as long as our flight distance. This small world can't be this big. And Lin was still adamant about his theory. Lan Xiaoni stared at Lin with a dumbstruck expression. What are you talking about? And Lin, all right, he had forgotten that this mermaid didn't know anything about Earth. Lan Xiaoni's eyes suddenly lit up. Do you think this place is the same as the place we first came from? Do we have to activate something in order to change that world? A thoughtful expression appeared on Lin's face. Are you talking about the infinite sword formation? Lan Xiaoni was confused. What are you talking about? And Lin, that place is indeed very similar to this place with no end in sight. Relying on me to activate the burial sword chain of time, I absorbed all the death swords and left that world. And Lin muttered to himself for a moment, then continued. In truth, there are not as many death swords there as it seems. If we keep flying, we might just be crossing the same space. Lan Xiaoni was astonished. You're saying this is like a ghost going around in circles? And Lin pursed his lips. You can say that. He glanced at the white clouds in the vast sky and said, this place is very likely to be the same. The space we're flying through might be repeating itself. This time, both of them fell into silence. If that was the case, how could they change it? Previously, and Lin had the sword burial whispering chain, but this time, he had nothing. To put it bluntly, they still couldn't find a direction. Sigh. If I could see through all the matter and space in this world, I might be able to find a loophole. But that's impossible. Lan Xiaoni sat on the huge flying seashell with her hands supporting her cheeks as she murmured to herself. See through all the matter and space in this world? And Lin faltered slightly upon hearing this before his eyes gradually lit up. Hee, who said it's impossible? A faint smile appeared on Lin's face. Lan Xiaoni turned toward Lin with shock in her eyes. No way, could it be that you could do something like that too? Countless stars suddenly flashed past Lin's eyes, immediately following, which his pupils became clear and reflected the entire world. Divine simulation technique. In an instant, a colorless ripple proliferated outward for several hundred kilometers. Regardless of whether it was the shape of the clouds, the flow of the air, or the flow of vital energy, all of the details were reflected in his mind. Climate, space, matter. He could see everything in a panoramic view. I got it, and Lin's eyes gradually regained clarity, but his face had become extremely pale. Big Boss and Lin, are you all right? Lan Xiaoni was given a fright by the sudden weakening of Lin's aura, and she asked in a panicked voice. I'm fine. And Lin brought out a high-rank spirit pill from his storage ring before swallowing it. Using the divine simulation technique was extremely taxing on one's mind, and it could only be used once a month at most. Otherwise, it would cause severe damage to one's body and even deplete one's lifespan. And Lin only used it once, and he felt as if his body had been completely depleted. However, the result was good. I found a loophole in this world. And Lin smiled. Are you really all right? Lan Xiaoni didn't really care about that. And Lin shook his head. I'm really fine. Come with me. He flew toward a certain direction atop his brick. Lan Xiaoni followed behind him with a concerned expression on her seashell. Not long after that, and Lin stopped at a certain place. Lan Xiaoni looked around, but she didn't discover anything out of the ordinary. However, and Lin silently pulled out his evil-slaying sword. Both of us were wrong. Why do we have to fly above the clouds? Lan Xiaoni wasn't stupid, and her expression instantly shifted as she turned toward the fluffy white clouds in the sky. That's right, the path is right below the clouds. It's right below the white clouds in this place. And Lin slashed toward the white clouds down below. An inky black sword projection tore through the white clouds, creating a rift over 10,000 feet in length. There was a white spiral spatial passageway beneath the clouds. My God, how did you discover this spatial passageway without any spatial energy fluctuations? Lan Xiaoni stared at Enlin with reverence on her face. You won't understand even if I tell you. Let's go. Enlin couldn't be bothered to explain. Lan Xiaoni, if it weren't for the fact that she couldn't defeat Enlin, she would definitely charge up and pummel him with her fists. Enlin flew toward the spatial passageway with an extremely grave expression. The difficulty of this ball of light world had already far exceeded his imagination. If it weren't for his divine simulation technique, he didn't even know how long he would be trapped here. This was not a trial that a soul formation stage living being could pass. He felt like every time he entered a ball of light world, the difficulty of the next ball of light world would increase. This had nothing to do with the order in which he had chosen. It was as if the difficulty could be adjusted at will. After passing through the spatial passageway, Enlin arrived in another world. This was also a vast expanse of clouds that stretched as far as the eye could see. However, there was a real, yet illusory, setting sun at the end of the clouds and the blue sky, dyeing the white clouds into the color of fire. This is, Enlin faltered slightly as a sense of extreme danger suddenly welled up in his heart. Two heaven-piercing long swords suddenly appeared in the air not far away from him, and their earth-shattering sword intent seemed to be able to crush the heavens. A living being enshrouded in black mist with only a pair of crimson eyes visible stood in the air before speaking in an extremely hoarse voice. Do you prefer life or death? Chapter 1050. Two extremely fearsome flying swords tore through the air toward Enlin and Lan Xiaoni. Oh, I didn't think you would be able to block my 99th attack. A cruel smile appeared on the ancient heavenly fiend celestial's face. However, this must be your limit, right? I'm going to attack again. Oh, who would have thought that you would be able to block one of my attacks? The ancient heavenly fiend celestial flew through the air with the black and white celestial swords still revolving around its body. Wah, my chest has been flattened by you. Lan Xiaoni was extremely aggrieved, and tears flowed from her eyes. It's all your fault. You have to compensate me. Enlin was once again sent flying for several thousand meters by the two terrifying sword projections. Unless Xiao Shou rose up and became the main attacker. This was the ancient heavenly fiend celestial that the high priests of the two tribes had to sacrifice their lives to kill. Lan Xiaoni immediately hid behind Enlin upon seeing this. After the ancient heavenly fiend celestial unleashed its 99th attack. At this moment, the black mist figure spoke again. This is the last time. Do you prefer life or death? The sword projections dissipated, and the two of them were still completely unscathed behind the black brick. Speaking of which, is this the only attack you know, esteemed fiend celestial? The black mist figure nodded. Oh, so you prefer life. Then I'll kill both of you. Do it again, your sister. Thankfully, the ancient heavenly fiend celestial's attacks were very simple and inflexible, and the chaotic alloy brick was also very sturdy, so they were able to maintain an invincible position. Of course, it was also very unlikely that they would be able to win. If the ancient heavenly fiend celestial was already dead, then what was this thing before them? Of course it's life. Enlin replied without any hesitation. Boundless sword intent filled the entire space around them with a boundless aura of death. Two extremely terrifying spatial rifts appeared in the trajectory of the flying sword's attacks, from which bursts of turbulent energy that had yet to dissipate tore through everything in their surroundings. What followed next was the inhumane and boundless one more time. Enlin and Lan Xiaoni were still sent flying by the brick. Enlin and Lan Xiaoni were then sent flying for several thousand meters again. Big Boss Enlin, aren't you very powerful? Why don't you go out and beat it? Lan Xiaoni couldn't take it anymore, and she sobbed. The two of them couldn't help but cry out. If women were made of water, then this mermaid was made of the sea. Her tears were so much that no matter how much she cried, she couldn't stop crying. Again, the two of them didn't dare to face the ancient heavenly fiend celestial head-on. The black brick hurtled the two of them back several kilometers before they finally managed to stabilize themselves. Suddenly, a hideous face appeared on the black mist figure. It had two horns on its head, and its face was red with fangs. It grinned and said, "This ancient heavenly demon god's favorite thing to do is to completely destroy the things you like. Ha ha ha." His personality was too much of a demon king. Did he have to be so dedicated? What the hell? Was this ancient heavenly fiend celestial sick? Do you prefer life or death? Even its might hadn't been reduced by much. It was still terrifying enough to make one's heart palpitate. However, this must be your limit, right? Let me do it again. The ancient heavenly fiend celestial pointed a finger, and the two celestial swords shot forth like dragons. The two celestial swords struck the chaotic alloy brick, and Lin and Lan Xiaoni were knocked back several kilometers again. And Lin faltered slightly upon hearing this. Wasn't this a retarded question? Who didn't like to live? Come on, ravage me to your heart's content. Lan Xiaoni finally came to her senses, and she released her arms with a sheepish expression. She shook her head from side to side, as if Lin had struck her pretty hard. Death remnant intent? Remnant intent power? Oh, I didn't think it would be able to withstand my fourth attack. Hee, I'm the big boss. Shouldn't I send my underlings to build up my might before fighting? Underling Lan, why are you crying and hugging me from behind? And Lin chuckled coldly. Boom! Two more earth-shattering sword strikes descended as he spoke. Thus, Lin and Lan Xiaoni were knocked back several kilometers again. Lin and Lan Xiaoni. Ancient heavenly fiend celestial. Thus, the ancient heavenly fiend celestial unleashed another sword strike. A strange sound erupted, and the two celestial swords trembled lightly in the air as if they had deflated, but they didn't strike Lin's black brick. Lin was also startled upon seeing this, and he turned to look at the humanoid ball of black mist before him. Don't cry all the time. My clothes are all wet from your tears. Lin snapped. Lin, Lan Xiaoni, the ancient heavenly fiend celestial unleashed an enraged roar. Slash. Oh, I didn't think you would be able to withstand my third attack. A cruel smile suddenly appeared on the ancient heavenly fiend celestial's face. However, this must be your limit, right? I'm going to attack you again. And Lin was crushed by a hard black brick, and it was extremely uncomfortable. Lan Xiaoni continued to sob and ignore him. He suddenly felt as if there were two soft and fluffy objects pressing against his back as he spoke. His waist was also tightly encircled by a pair of slender arms. The ancient heavenly fiend celestial's sword strike was imbued with the sword intent and residual power it had attained. Its power was unfathomable, and it struck them with a sense of extreme danger. It was the exact same technique, but it was also the exact same lines. Lan Xiaoni even used a hand to tidy up her slightly disheveled hair as she calmly awaited the ancient heavenly fiend celestial's attack. F***CK. Well, let go of me. I'm fine now. And Lin said with a resigned expression. PFFF. The flying sword transformed into two streaks of light, one black and one white, which sliced through the sea of clouds for close to 10 kilometers. A cruel smile suddenly appeared on the ancient heavenly fiend celestial's face. However, this must be your limit, right? I'm going to attack you again. Lan Xiaoni's voice faltered, and she didn't dare to say anything else. She was afraid that Lin would use her as cannon fodder if he was displeased, and the ancient heavenly fiend celestial gave them another attack. Again, Lin's eyelids twitched, and he positioned his brick in front of him again. Lan Xiaoni screamed at the sight of the figure in the black mist. It's the ancient heavenly fiend celestial. Why is it here? Lin used all his strength to stabilize the black brick, but it was still sent hurtling toward Lin like a cannonball. Lin's expression darkened. Why should I compensate you? I don't have any breasts to compensate you. Countless question marks appeared in Lin's mind. Lan Xiaoni hugged Lin tightly, and she couldn't even be bothered to let go. She could attack Enlin again anyway, so she sobbed incessantly. Wah! This fiend celestial is so scary. What should we do? Ah! Lan Xiaoni screamed as her slender body was struck by Enlin's body. Lan Xiaoni was on the verge of tears. Even though it was very uncomfortable, she could only hold onto Enlin with all her might and run outside, where she would be sliced in half by Enlin's sword intent in an instant. Enlin, thankfully, there was something soft and warm on his back, which provided some cushioning. Otherwise, it would be even more painful. I also like to live. Lan Xiaoni also chimed in a panicked voice. Lan Xiaoni. Enlin and Lan Xiaoni both stared expressionlessly at the ancient heavenly fiend celestial. Then I'll fulfill your wish. All of you go to hell. Ha ha! The ancient heavenly fiend celestial burst into raucous laughter as it waved its hand through the air. Oh, I didn't think you would be able to block my second attack. The ancient heavenly fiend celestial flew through the air before a cruel smile appeared on its face. However, this must be your limit, right? Let me try again. I like to die. Lan Xiaoni raised her hands high into the air as she corrected. The flying sword instantly struck the black brick, upon which an extremely terrifying blade projection erupted forth. Enlin's expression also shifted drastically, and he immediately pulled out his chaotic alloy brick before hiding behind the black brick. Phew, that was close. Enlin murmured with fear lingering in his heart. Boom. Chapter 1051. The 100th attack didn't arrive as promised. The two black and white celestial swords beside the ancient heavenly fiend celestial stopped firing. Even a top-rate mighty figure would be exhausted after unleashing such a terrifying attack 100 times in a row, let alone this ancient heavenly fiend celestial, which was most likely just a manifestation of its residual power. A scorching light appeared in Enlin's eyes. After waiting for so long, this moment was finally here. Take this brick. Enlin tossed the brick to Lan Xiaoni before charging toward the ancient heavenly fiend celestial. The ancient heavenly fiend celestial straightened its back, and a powerful aura soared into the sky. Its voice was like thunder. Do you prefer life or death? Enlin faltered in fright at the ancient heavenly fiend celestial's aura. Then, a cold smile appeared on his face. If I like death, then come and cut me up. The ancient heavenly fiend celestial tore open a spatial passageway in front of Enlin. Ha ha! I love making my enemies' wishes impossible. Look, this is the spatial passageway leading to Master Shihaisi. I will grant you life. It was quite clear that it was letting them go. Enlin and Lan Xiaoni were astonished. How could it change its attitude so quickly? Enlin chuckled coldly. Then I like to live. A gratified smile appeared on the ancient heavenly fiend celestial's face. You are a very good opponent. I will grant you your wish and grant you life. You may leave now. After saying that, it even stretched out its hand and made a pleased gesture. Enlin, Lan Xiaoni. What a cowardly fiend celestial. How could Enlin just leave like this? Did he really think he had endured those attacks for nothing? He sneered. But I want to hack you to death right now. What do you think I should do? The ancient heavenly fiend celestial. We were just sparring. Hee. You Asterisk King gave me 99 sword strikes. Now, I'll let you have a taste of my sword techniques. Enlin didn't waste any more time. He roared, and the origin energy of the netherworld instantly erupted. His power skyrocketed, and the evil-slaying sword reverberated through the heavens as he slashed toward the ancient heavenly fiend celestial's face. In that instant, the entire sky and the sea of clouds instantly dimmed. There was only that pitch-black sword gleam with boundless power. The sword light tore through the void like a black crescent moon that could devour heaven and earth. In the nick of time, the ancient heavenly fiend celestial summoned two swords in front of it. Rumble! The incomparably mighty sword projection slashed down on the black and white swords, sending the ancient heavenly fiend celestial flying several thousand meters with an extremely domineering force. Oh, I didn't expect you to be able to block my full-powered attack. and Lin stepped through the air and looked at the ancient heavenly fiend celestial. A cruel smile suddenly appeared on his face. However, this must be your limit, right? Let me do it again. After saying that, and Lin slashed at the ancient heavenly fiend celestial again without any hesitation. Lan Xiaoni couldn't help but cheer upon hearing those familiar words. Well done, Big Boss and Lin. Beat that bastard to death. Now, then Lin was bullying the ancient heavenly fiend celestial. It was as though he was taking revenge for her. The pleasure of finally being able to take revenge made her feel comfortable all over. The pitch-black sword radiance traversed the heavens and the earth, as if even the radiance of the setting sun would be engulfed. At this moment, it was as though Lin was the true fiend celestial. The ancient heavenly fiend celestial screamed miserably under Lin's attacks. The ancient heavenly fiend celestial had tried to retaliate, but the black and white celestial swords would tremble slightly every time it tried to activate them, as though they were resisting with all their might. They probably wanted to vomit after hitting that brick, so they didn't want to do anything else now. Attack? No such thing exists. The ancient heavenly fiend celestial's attack method seemed to be relying on that flying sword. Otherwise, his attack on Lin would not have been as simple as before. Now that the flying swords were on strike, it could only be a small fry when Lin unleashed his 18th sword strike. The ancient heavenly fiend celestial's defenses were broken through. A gash appeared on its chest, and pitch-black blood gushed out. I want you to die. The ancient heavenly fiend celestial flew into a rage at the thought of being injured by Junior. It gripped its sword with both hands and slashed at Lin. Puff, puff, two muffled explosions rang out. He didn't even unleash any moves. The ancient heavenly fiend celestial was slightly taken aback. At this moment, Lin's sword light arrived once again and tore a huge gash in its body. Lin had finally seen through it. The two swords were the main body, and the ancient heavenly fiend celestial was just here to act cute. His sword aura was like a rainbow as he pursued the ancient heavenly fiend celestial, aiming for its vitals with every strike. The ancient heavenly fiend celestial was extremely sullen. It didn't even have the strength to resist. You can't kill me. I'm the ancient heavenly fiend celestial. If you kill me, millions of demonic creatures will hunt you down. You will never have peace. The ancient heavenly fiend celestial threatened. And Lin chuckled. The Qing dynasty has already fallen. Ancient heavenly fiend celestial, what did you say? Whoosh. Caught off guard, a black shadow flashed past like a bolt of lightning, instantly tearing the ancient heavenly fiend celestial's body into two. A white light flashed in Lin's eyes, and streams of wind revolved around his sword as he looked at the shocked fiend celestial. You've already been dead for who knows how many tens of thousands of years. Dead people should be quiet, so cut the crap. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A series of peerlessly sharp sword projections appeared in the air like a white spider web, instantly slicing the ancient heavenly fiend celestial into thousands of pieces. Lin didn't stop there. The 6 divine flames in his left hand and the holy vermilion flame in his right hand burned toward the ancient heavenly fiend celestial's body at the same time. The terrifying temperatures instantly melted the ancient heavenly fiend celestial's body into smoke. This time, even if the ancient heavenly fiend celestial knew of freakish ability like blood rebirth, it still wouldn't be able to survive. Lin was a professional when it came to landing the killing blow. Big Boss Lin is so awesome. Even the Demon King who once ruled over the entire West Sea is no match for you. Lan Xiaoni flew over with an expression of reverence and admiration on her face as she hugged her black brick. Hee. It's just a small matter. Don't make a big fuss. And Lin smiled lightly. He gripped the ancient heavenly fiend celestial's 2 swords tightly before refining them. Once the refinement was complete, something extremely astonishing happened. The 2 celestial swords transformed into a jade pendant. The jade pendant was smooth and round, and it was constructed from a fusion of black and white. One side was white, while the other side was black. Lin couldn't help but unleash his divine inspection technique out of curiosity. Heaven and Earth Jade Pendant. White as the sky, black as the earth. Extremely profound and exquisite. It can unleash a myriad of transformations and is integrated into the Jade Pendant. Divine rank material. Lin was ecstatic. He didn't think that this would also be a divine rank material. He had initially thought that the two swords were weapons. Now that he thought about it, the ancient heavenly fiend celestial had most likely used the power of the heaven and earth jade pendant to transform it into the black and white celestial swords. However, a divine rank material was even better. This way, he would be one step closer to forging a divine rank weapon. And Lin stowed the heaven and earth jade pendant away with an elated expression. He was struck by a rush of dizziness. The two of them returned to a familiar place. And Lin raised his head and was instantly given a huge fright. He discovered that the statue of Shi Haizi, which had been standing on the spot this entire time, was now sitting on the ground and looking at him with a smile on its face. Chapter 1052. Congratulations, fated ones, on successfully passing the trial of the white ball of light. I hope you can take the treasures with you to revitalize your tribes. The statue of Shi Haizi sat on the ground with a smile on its face. That's right, the statue had developed facial expressions. And Lin was astonished. Did the statue finally become a spirit? Statue Shi Haizi. Lan Xiaoni's mouth also gaped open in shock. Are you really Senior Shi Haizi? Shi Haizi looked up with a handsome, yet slightly stiff smile. That's me. There was only one ball of light left, so the divine intent I left here has been awakened. You've made it to this stage, so you have the right to trigger this remnant divine intent. And Lin's eyes lit up. Was he going to tell them a story, or give them some benefits? Lan Xiaoni's heart was also surging with emotions. She couldn't compete with Lin the fight for treasures, but if her ancestor was going to give out some benefits, she should get one, right? In that case, she wouldn't have to go back and embarrass herself too much. A disappointed expression suddenly appeared on the statue of Shi Haizi. Sigh, I really didn't think that you would choose to take my treasures instead of the secrets of the two tribes. Are all juniors so snobbish these days? Lan Xiaoni was extremely aggrieved. She wanted to choose the secrets of the two tribes. However, Lin was simply too terrifying. What could she do if Lin wanted to choose the treasures? She looked at Shi Haizi and was just about to tell him everything, but she swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth when she glanced at Lin. Lin couldn't help but retort. You have the gall to say that? If you really want to give benefits to your juniors, then don't go through all these twists and turns. Why don't you just give us the treasures and the secrets of the two tribes? Why do you have to choose one of the two? The statue of Shi Haizi choked upon hearing this. He opened his mouth, but he didn't know what to say. He fell silent, as if he really was thinking about why he did this in the first place. And Lan Xiaoni, a thought seemed to have occurred to Shi Haizi, and his eyes lit up. That's because my Dao partner and I wanted to test the fate between us. Now that fate is here, the secrets of the two races shall be buried at the bottom of the sea forever. This is the choice of fate. The corner of Lin's mouth twitched. It was as if he hadn't said anything at all. Lan Xiaoni was astonished. Is this what it means to leave it to fate? Wouldn't that be too irresponsible to the two races? Lin silently gave a thumbs up. Well said. However, he actually dared to say this in front of the old ancestor. He was really stubborn. Sure enough, Shi Haizi's statue's face darkened. It was literally black. Its pristine white head suddenly turned black, as if it were a little angry. Lan Xiaoni realized that she had misspoken, and her face paled with fright. She was just about to open her mouth to salvage the situation when Shi Haizi spoke again. However, his voice was extremely cold and devoid of any emotion. Who would have thought that a human would be able to sneak in here? Shi Haizi looked at Lin, and Lin puffed out his chest. What's wrong with humans? Are you looking down on humans? A smile appeared on Shi Haizi's face, and he opened his palm. Black Ball World, activate. Rumble. An extremely powerful spatial power instantly enshrouded Lin and Lan Xiaoni. and Lin was struck by a wave of nausea and dizziness before arriving in an extremely vast cave. The cave was riddled with jagged rocks of all shapes and sizes, and there were also many peculiar carvings standing silently around the edges of the cave. What the hell is this? Teleporting us to the light ball world just like that? I still haven't decided whether I want to continue participating in the trial. And Lin grumbled as he patted his dizzy head. Big Boss and Lin, it's a waste not to take anything from this place. With your power, no enemies can do anything to you anyway. Lan Xiaoni encouraged. And Lin looked at the mermaid princess, who was becoming more and more like an underling, and a gratified smile appeared on his face. After this trial is over, I'll reward you handsomely. All right. A vibrant smile appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face. She had already lost all hope in the trial anyway, so she might as well follow Enlin and take some of Enlin's specialties home. That way, she would have more confidence in explaining things to her seniors. It can only be said that Enlin was too bad *SS. She had already worked hard for 6 worlds, but her efforts were still futile. She couldn't be blamed for this. Enlin turned his attention to the final trial. The cave was extremely vast, and the very edge of the cave was an inky black rock wall. This was most likely an underground world. There was also a scorching river of flames slowly flowing through the cave, illuminating the entire dark space with its light. There was a strange sacrificial altar on the other side of the river of flames. It was enshrouded in flames and poisonous miasma, creating a perilous realm over 1 kilometer in radius. At the center of the sacrificial altar, there was a blue stone that was glowing with a faint light. Lan Xiaoni was elated. Big Boss and Lin, could that stone be the treasure of this trial? And Lin stroked his chin as he looked at the surging river of flames, the terrifyingly hot flames, and the layers of poisonous miasma that were capable of corroding all things. Could it be that this trial isn't about defeating monsters? Instead, it's about progressing from the starting point to the finishing point? Progressing? Lan Xiaoni's features paled slightly as she spoke in a trembling voice. Then, those obstacles must be very terrifying, right? The ancient heavenly fiend celestial in the white ball trial was already extremely terrifying. If the difficulty of the black ball trial was changed to flames and poisonous miasma, then wouldn't that mean that those flames and poisonous miasma were extremely terrifying? Stay here and don't move. I'll go on my own, Enlin instructed. Lan Xiaoni nodded obediently as she looked at Enlin's reliable figure. All right, I'll wait for you. Enlin's body flashed, and he began to cross over the winding river of flames. Boom, boom, boom. All of a sudden, the river of flames surged violently, and a series of terrifying flaming dragons rose into the sky before pouncing toward Enlin at an astonishing speed. Enlin heaved a sigh of relief upon seeing this. It was always good to see some movement. What if this world remained completely still? That would be quite troublesome. Break! He pressed a hand down. Vital energy surged violently, forming a gigantic vital energy palm with a radius of over 1 kilometer, which crushed down toward the flaming dragons. Enlin's simple attack was comparable to a full-force attack from a cultivator at the soul formation pinnacle stage. Rumble, the gigantic vital energy palm, was imbued with unimaginable power, and it pulverized several gigantic flaming dragons. Enlin also borrowed the momentum to descend to the ground and successfully cross over the river of flames. After crossing over the river of flames returned to its original calm state, as if nothing had happened. A faint smile appeared on Enlin's face. These obstacles might be troublesome for normal soul formation stage prodigies, but they were extremely easy for a soul formation stage cultivator like him. He began to walk toward the sacrificial altar. The sacrificial altar was enshrouded in terrifying crimson flames, and the scorching power warped the air and incinerated everything in its path. This was an extremely pure and fearsome flame power. And Lin walked up the sacrificial altar, and the 4 divine flames transformed into indestructible armor. He was like the master of all flames, and wherever he went, all flames would bow before him. His path was unimpeded. The flames were extremely powerful, and they were powerful enough to melt all soul formation stage cultivators into puddles of blood. However, Enlin was even more powerful, and his power had long surpassed that of a soul formation stage cultivator. The poisonous miasma within the sacrificial altar was still the same. Even though it was extremely terrifying, it was only effective against soul formation stage living beings, and not against Enlin. Hee, isn't this a little too easy? Enlin passed through the poisonous miasma and walked toward the center of the sacrificial altar, arriving in front of the blue rectangular stone. The stone was very tall, about a dozen meters, and it exuded an extremely powerful energy fluctuation. It was this energy fluctuation that made Enlin feel that it was the treasure of this trip. So is it you? Enlin reached out and touched the cold stone. Suddenly, a sense of danger that made his hair stand on end came from behind him. Enlin immediately turned around, and his pupils contracted. Before he could even react, a blue shadow that was invisible to the naked eye had already pierced through his chest. The sharp light was imbued with a vast divine might, and it instantly tore open the divine body that he was so proud of, pierced through his heart, and pinned him firmly onto the blue stone. Chapter 10:53. Pwah! Enlin's heart was punctured, and he threw up a mouthful of blood. This was the power of the divine Tao, and it was an extremely powerful one at that. A blue spear pierced through Enlin's body, and even the blue rock behind him. Black symbols appeared on the spear, for which an extremely fearsome restrictive power erupted and rendered Enlin completely powerless. His heart was punctured, and blood flowed down the spear to the ground. His vitality was quickly fading away. Enlin's first reaction was to turn to Lan Xiaoni, only to discover that Lan Xiaoni was also looking at him with an astonished expression. It wasn't her. Then who was it? Even with Enlin's powerful divine sense, he was still unable to detect where the enemy was. Right at this moment, the rhombus-shaped black crystal in front of his chest suddenly erupted with an extremely powerful life force energy, which flowed into his body to resist the spear's power of the divine Tao and prevent it from destroying his body any further. Was he saved? No, he wasn't. Enlin could sense that his body was becoming more and more feeble, and his blood was flowing away relentlessly. Gu Yu's black crystal was only delaying his death. If things continued like this, he would still be screwed. A burst of power suddenly converged on his finger, and his storage ring slowly fell off. No! Enlin let loose a heart-wrenching cry. His cries of grief and indignation were even more anguished than when his heart had been punctured. The storage ring contained hundreds of millions of his family's wealth. That was his lifeblood. However, the storage ring really did fly away. It flew out of the sacrificial altar, past the sea of flames, past the scorching river of flames, and arrived on the other side of the river. Crack! A spatial rift suddenly appeared. This was a white spatial passageway that exuded a gentle light. Enlin's storage ring hovered in front of the spatial rift. Big Boss Enlin, are you all right? Lan Xiaoni let loose a cry of surprise. Enlin, do I look like I'm all right? Enlin spoke with difficulty. I'm not all right. I feel like I'm about to die. Lan Xiaoni, I'm here to save you. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded. Junior of the Spirit Fish Clan, take this human storage ring and leave through that spatial passageway, and you'll be able to complete the trial of the Black Ball world. All of my treasures are in my storage ring. You can use the treasures in my storage ring to revitalize the Spirit Fish Clan. This is your mission, and you can fulfill it now. Shi Haizi's voice reverberated through the air. Enlin and Lan Xiaoni both faltered upon hearing this. Lan Xiaoni turned to look at the storage ring beside the crack. I'll take Big Boss Enlin's storage ring, and then I can leave. That's true. That way, I'll be able to complete the mission that the Spirit Fish Clan has given me, and all of the treasures will be mine. Lan Xiaoni's breathing became heavier and heavier, and a scorching light appeared in her eyes. Enlin, on the other hand, felt a chill in his heart, and he felt unwell. This was a fantastic opportunity for Lan Xiaoni. This was a complete victory. Everything became clear. No wonder Guyu had said that Lan Xiaoni was his greatest enemy. No wonder the high priest of the Spirit Fish clan, Yu Feiyu, trusted Lan Xiaoni so much. It turned out that Lan Xiaoni didn't need to be extraordinarily powerful. Just her bloodline alone was enough to crush all external forces. With a Spirit Fish clan ancestor opening a backdoor for her, what did she have to fear? The last Black Ball world turned out to be just a formality. Everything that Enlin had worked so hard for was all for Lan Xiaoni. How infuriating. He gritted his teeth in the face of this completely unreasonable trial, but there was nothing he could do. Not only was the terrifying power of the divine Tao imbued within the blue spear, destroying his vitality, but had also sealed off his meridians, consciousness, and sea of vital energy. Without a powerful external force, there was no way he could break through this restriction. An expression of despair appeared on Enlin's face. If things continued like this, his enemies wouldn't even have to do anything. He was going to die from excessive blood loss. Lan Xiaoni was going to take his treasures and leave this tomb before he died. Was he going to die here? He gripped onto the spear and tried to pull it out. He let loose an enraged roar, but he couldn't muster any strength, as if he were trying to pull out a nail that had been rooted into his body. Lan Xiaoni's body shuddered slightly upon hearing Enlin's roar, and her blue eyes gradually regained clarity. She turned toward Enlin, who was struggling to break free. If I take away his storage ring, what will happen to him? That's not something you should be worried about. He's your competitor, and you've only met each other in this tomb. What does his fate have to do with you? Shihaizi's voice sounded again. He'll die, right? Lan Xiaoni asked in a faint voice. Shihaizi fell silent. The answer was obvious. As long as they didn't do anything, Enlin would slowly die no matter how powerful his life force was after his heart had been pierced. Big Boss Enlin. Lan Xiaoni called out softly as she stared at Enlin with tears in her blue eyes, which were filled with reluctance and conflict. Enlin had never thought that Lan Xiaoni would look at him like this. Indeed, the two of them had been competitors from the very beginning. It was understandable that Enlin had the upper hand because of his power. Similarly, the tables had turned now. Lan Xiaoni had relied on her bloodline to forcefully cheat, so she couldn't be blamed for that. Hence, Enlin was very surprised to see this expression on Lan Xiaoni's face. A hint of hope lit up in Enlin's heart. Could it be that she was going to, I'm sorry? Lan Xiaoni wiped away her tears and ran toward the storage ring. Enlin, all right, this was the cruel and F***ed-up reality. He had fallen at the hands of this shameless tomb builder, so there was nothing he could do aside from yelling at Enlin. Lan Xiaoni picked up Enlin's storage ring and carefully put it on her finger. She stared at the storage ring on her finger and fell into a daze for a moment. In the end, she took a deep breath, and a look of determination gradually appeared in her eyes. Lan Xiaoni turned and flew toward Enlin at high speed. Roar! A series of terrifying flaming dragons roared as they pounced toward the blue figure crossing the river of flames. Blue Spirit Ice Bridge. Lan Xiaoni let loose a clear cry, and a white bead flashed as an ice bridge exuding an extremely frosty aura extended from both ends, as if it were going to freeze everything in its path. The flaming dragons crashed into the ice bridge, causing it to tremor violently, but it did not melt. Lan Xiaoni transformed into a streak of blue light and successfully crossed the river of flames before continuing toward Enlin. Enlin looked at the figure that had suddenly turned around and flew toward him. He could see the determination on Lan Xiaoni's face, and he momentarily forgot about the situation he was in. Have you gone mad? Lan Xiaoni pursed her lips tightly as her eyes lingered on the spear in Enlin's chest. I haven't gone mad. I just feel like the setting of one treasure per ball of light is correct, so there must be treasures in this world. A vibrant smile appeared on her face as she continued. Hence, I feel like this spear that was able to puncture your body must be a treasure of this world. How could I, Lan Xiaoni, not take something that's so valuable? This spear is mine, for sure. Chapter 1054. The spear was a treasure of this world? It was clearly just a technique materialized from the power of the divine Tao. And Lin looked at the oncoming Lan Xiaoni, but he didn't say anything in the end. In reality, he didn't even have the energy to say anything. Even though he had already cultivated his evergreen technique to the second stage and had his body of the war god to sustain him, he was still unable to stop his life force from flowing away. After crossing the flaming river, Lan Xiaoni continued toward Lin. There was a perilous realm over a kilometer in radius around the sacrificial altar. Scorching flames surged into the sky, while a poisonous miasma surrounded the sacrificial altar. Lan Xiaoni entered the range of the scorching flames, and the fearsome flames instantly incinerated the protective barrier of water around her. She let loose a wail of anguish, and she immediately released the little blue fish. Sacrifice blue fish. Bang! A crisp sound exploded. The little blue fish that had accompanied her throughout her battles began to glow with a dazzling light, enshrouding her body in a layer of extremely powerful water power. After sacrificing herself, the little blue fish became completely dull and colorless, transforming into a piece of useless jade. A blue barrier enveloped Lan Xiaoni's entire body as she struggled through the sea of flames. Go back! Shihaizi's enraged roar erupted from the sky. Boundless might fell from the sky and instantly destroyed the blue barrier around Lan Xiaoni's body. Scorching flames pounced toward Lan Xiaoni like a ferocious beast, scorching her skin in a frenzy. Lan Xiaoni let loose a cry of agony. Her fair skin was scorched bright red, and it was even beginning to char. The spoiled mermaid princess had never been subjected to such torture before. And Lin looked at the wailing Lan Xiaoni, who was like a fish struggling in a pot of boiling oil. He opened his mouth, but he didn't know what to say. Just as he thought Lan Xiaoni was going to retreat, he discovered that the mermaid was charging toward him at an even faster speed. She was already shedding tears of pain, and she was biting her lips until they bled, but she was still charging toward him without any hesitation. And Lin was a little dazed by her determination. Was this still the same cowardly girl who only knew how to cower behind him in the face of danger? Was this the same salted fish who was afraid of death and only knew how to cry, "Papa, save me," when he encountered a desperate situation? Lan Xiaoni was like a fearless warrior now. The loss of life caused Lin's eyes to gradually become blurry. He could only see a figure approaching him recklessly in the distorted space of the sea of flames. Lan Xiaoni, you'll die. He couldn't help but ask in a hoarse voice. Lan Xiaoni turned a deaf ear to his words, and through her astonishing willpower, she broke through the range of the flames and entered the poisonous miasma without any hesitation. The poisonous mist was extremely corrosive and seeped into Baiju's barrier. The luster of Lan Xiaoni's skin gradually dimmed as a result of the poisonous miasma. The burned areas had even decayed, and inky black pus and blood flowed from them. Not only did the poison stay on the surface, but it also seeped into his flesh and bones, bringing him indescribable pain. The scales on the glossy blue fish tail fell off piece by piece. Blood splashed everywhere, but it continued to move forward. Lan Xiaoni's entire body was trembling from the pain, but she still stubbornly pressed forward. She had no path of retreat, and she had already abandoned a long time ago. Finally, the blue figure broke through the poisonous miasma and successfully arrived at the core area of the sacrificial altar. I did it. Lan Xiaoni forced a smile onto her face. Her flawlessly carved features were now a little hideous from the poisonous blood and charred wounds. No one knew just how much pain she had endured. The excruciating pain of being plunged into a frying pan and being devoured by countless poisons still made her body tremble instinctively. She dragged her tattered body and slowly crawled toward Lin while wagging her tail. Along the way, she left behind a trail of black blood and fallen scales. And Lin was finally unable to maintain his composure. He clenched his trembling fists as he stared at the mermaid crawling toward him. Have you gone insane? If I don't go crazy, you'll die. Lan Xiaoni crawled over to Enlin with a determined expression, as if there were flames burning in her eyes. Enlin looked at the mermaid who had been so severely wounded that her facial features could no longer be seen. Doesn't it hurt? Lan Xiaoni gripped the spear tightly with her charred hands and pulled it out. She exerted force, and the charred wounds on her body were torn open again. She burst into tears. Of course it hurts. How could it not hurt? But if you die here, it'll hurt even more. The mermaid princess used all of her remaining strength to pull the spear out from Enlin's body. Her wrist was sliced open again, and what little blood remained flowed out onto her arm. Spirit fish, divine blood, mystical technique, fish dragon dance. An earth-shattering dragon roar erupted as boundless power surged toward the spear. Boom! The blue spear finally left the blue boulder and Enlin's body. Lan Xiaoni's body slowly plummeted toward the ground, and her feeble arms were unable to even hold onto the spear. Finally, I did it. In the next instant, her slender waist was encircled by a muscular arm. Enlin looked at the woman in his arms with a smile. Oi, you dropped your spear. Lan Xiaoni smiled. Before she had a chance to say anything, Enlin interjected, I'll keep it for you for now. Enlin quickly removed the storage ring from Lan Xiaoni's hand as he spoke before stowing the spear into the storage ring. He then placed the storage ring on his own finger in a very natural manner. Lan Xiaoni, why is it that I risked my life twice to save a dog? Lan Xiaoni was so enraged that she coughed up blood and she began to sob again. Am I going to die? Don't worry. You'll be fine with me here, Enlin assured her. Lan Xiaoni was a little more reassured upon hearing this. She was very prone to impulsive actions, and only now did she feel a sense of lingering fear. She really didn't want to die. Enlin swallowed an immortal pill to ensure his own survival before pulling out a red jade coffin and placing Lan Xiaoni into the coffin. Lan Xiaoni's tears flowed down her face again. You even prepared a coffin for me, and you said I'd be fine. Lan Xiaoni soon realized that she was wrong. This coffin was able to absorb the surrounding energy and transform it into powerful life force energy to heal her injuries. Open your mouth, Enlin commanded. Lan Xiaoni didn't know what Enlin was doing, but she did as she was told. Enlin placed the final regenerative immortal pill into Lan Xiaoni's mouth. Lan Xiaoni swallowed the immortal pill, and she was a little touched. So you still have a conscience. Enlin pursed his lips. This stupid fish sure was easy to pacify. Her mood had improved so quickly. By the way, move your eyes away. I'm so ugly right now. You're not allowed to see me like this. Lan Xiaoni seemed to have realized something, and she scolded in a gentle voice. Enlin rolled his eyes. You're about to die from your injuries, and that's what you're focused on. Had this mermaid princess's brain been fried? However, Lan Xiaoni's injuries were indeed quite severe. Her snowy white skin was either charred black or rotted away, and it was a gruesome sight to behold. Enlin's heart throbbed with pain at the sight of Lan Xiaoni in her current state. He thought back to everything Lan Xiaoni had done and said, and he was at a loss for what to do. I told you to stop looking. Lan Xiaoni scolded. All right. Enlin nodded before sitting down to meditate to recover from his injuries. Everything fell silent. Only the sound of bubbles popping could be heard. Big Boss Enlin, am I an idiot? After what seemed like an eternity, Lan Xiaoni spoke again. That's right. You risked your life to save someone who indirectly killed your fiancé. You really are an idiot. Enlin didn't deny it. He's not my fiancé. Lan Xiaoni immediately flared up with rage, and she began to cough up blood again. I admit that I was once attracted to his looks, and I thought a marriage alliance like this wasn't a bad thing. However, I risked my life to save him, but he chose to run away without any hesitation, so I sentenced him to death. Thank God he didn't touch me. Otherwise, all of the Black Fox Tribe living beings would die. Lan Xiaoni's voice gradually softened. As expected, men who are too handsome are all bad apples. Men with ugly looks like you are much more reliable. Enlin, this compliment was truly refreshing and refined. Chapter 1055. Lan Xiaoni looked at Enlin, who was standing outside the blood-souled jade coffin, with a pleading expression. "Big Boss and Lin, I'm your savior now. Can you return my storage ring?" And Lin chuckled. "Underling Lon, isn't it only right for an underling to save a big boss?" Lon Xiaoni's lips twitched, but she seemed to have grown accustomed to Lin's shamelessness and didn't bring it up again. She was only feeling a little sorry for herself. Even she didn't know why she had made that choice. She simply didn't want to see Lin die, so she did it without any consideration for the consequences, nor did she think about whether she would die or not. As for their conversation, she selectively ignored it. Both of them fell silent as they silently recovered from their injuries. The cave world fell silent. After what felt like an eternity, Underling Lon and Lin suddenly said, What is it?" Lon Xiaoni opened her blue eyes to look at Lin, only to find that Lin was still abiding by his promise not to look at her. "Thank you," Lin said. Lon Xiaoni faltered slightly before a sense of accomplishment welled up in her heart. "So you know how to say that. How are you going to thank me?" Lin looked at the ground of the sacrificial altar in the distance. There was a long trail of blood interspersed with faint fish scales, as if it were a bridge connecting hell and heaven. He said in a gentle voice, "As your big boss, I'll protect you from now on." Lin's voice was extremely firm, as if he had just made an extremely important decision. Lon Xiaoni sniffled as tears welled up in her eyes. "Thank you, big boss." An underling had officially become an official member, so he had a big boss to protect now. This was something Lin could do for Lon Xiaoni. She had risked her life to save his life, so he definitely wouldn't stand by when she was being bullied. 2 hours later, Lin's injuries were almost completely healed. He stood up and surveyed his surroundings. Other than the flaming river that flowed continuously, his surroundings were extremely quiet. It was just like before. Lin took another glance at Lon Xiaoni. Lon Xiaoni's burns had already been healed by the blood jadeite soul coffin and the immortal pill, and scabs had already formed over her skin. Her smooth, snowy white skin had reappeared, and new scales had also appeared on her tail. She was no longer in her rotting state, and the ugly fish had reverted back to a beautiful fish. The mermaid's burns were basically cured, but the poison that had penetrated deep into her bones still needed a lot of time to be completely removed. Lon Xiaoni detected in Lin's gaze, and she looked into his eyes as a vibrant smile appeared on her face. "Big Boss and Lin, are we going to continue? My injuries are almost healed. I can come out now." And Lin immediately shook his head. "No, the toxins in your body have not been completely cleared. You better take a good rest here. I'll go take a look around first." "No, I want to go with you." Lon Xiaoni struggled to crawl out of the coffin. "If Shi Haizi comes after you again, he won't do anything to you with me around." And Lin fell silent as he looked at Lon Xiaoni, who had volunteered to be his human shield. At this moment, Lon Xiaoni had already jumped out of the coffin, and she spun around with a smile on her face. "See, Big Boss and Lin, I told you I was fine." "Erg." She spat out another mouthful of black blood. And Lon Xiaoni, what if I told you this is a natural process of detoxification? Would you believe me? Lon Xiaoni pouted as she looked at Lin with a pitiable expression. And Lin's lips twitched as he pointed at the coffin. "Get the F***CK back into the coffin right now. Lon Xiaoni's body trembled slightly, but she could only lie back into the coffin with an aggrieved expression in the face of Lin's tyrannical might. For some reason, a hint of sweetness welled up in her heart at the sight of Lin's enraged expression. And Lin then released Gundam 3 and Yao Ji from his storage ring before instructing them to protect Lon Xiaoni. Only then did he begin his exploration of this world. After Lon Xiaoni risked her life to save Lin, Shi Haizi never appeared again. Even so, Lin didn't dare to let his guard down. He unleashed his divine sense to its fullest extent while holding the vermilion bird mirror and the brick in his hands at the same time. That's right, in the face of this type of power that was beyond his abilities, only cheat-like items would be able to keep it at bay. The vermilion bird mirror and the brick were the best choices. And Lin arrived at the blue rectangular block before gently stroking the cracks on its surface. A massive hole had been punctured into this block by Shi Haizi's spear, but the energy fluctuations emanating from it were still extremely powerful. Divine inspection technique. A string of information began to appear in his mind. Sea Heartstone, a crystallization formed by the convergence of the power of the earth and the ocean in the depths of the West Sea. It is a top-tier container for weapon refinement and is a divine rank material. And Lin's eyes lit up. Another divine rank material. Furthermore, this was an extremely rare treasure that could be used to refine weapons. It looked like he had basically gathered all of the materials needed to refine a divine tool. A peculiar feeling welled up in Lin's heart. It was as if all of the treasures he had obtained in these ruins were all for the sake of giving him a chance to refine a divine tool. He shook his head and discarded this peculiar thought. Perhaps this was just the tomb owner's hobby of collecting treasures. He liked to let trial takers experience the peculiar feeling of being able to summon a divine tool after collecting enough treasures. And Lin picked up the Sea Heartstone without any hesitation and stowed it into his storage ring. He thought for a moment before carefully pulling out the blue spear from his storage ring. This spear was materialized from Shi Haizi's power of the divine Tao, and it was something that could easily pierce through his divine body and the Sea Heartstone. As such, he couldn't be too careful. In all honesty, if this spear really was materialized from a simple condensation of the power of the divine Tao, then there was no way that it would remain in its original state for so long. Even after putting it into his storage ring, there was still no change. This was far too strange. And Lin was worried that Shi Haizi would be alerted by the appearance of this spear. His entire body tensed up, and he looked nervously at the nearby space. After seeing that there wasn't any commotion, he felt a little reassured and used his divine inspection technique on the spear. Soon, information regarding the spear surged into his mind. Armor-piercing divine spear, materialized from Shi Haizi's power of the divine Tao and true intent of the divine Tao. It contains Shi Haizi's paramount understanding of the Tao of water attacks and can be absorbed for observation. And Lin faltered slightly upon receiving this information. As expected, this spear wasn't just a simple body of energy. It was also imbued with Shi Haizi's understanding of the Tao. This was equivalent to tossing him an inheritance. Even though the method was a little violent, it was still a good result, and Lin joined his hands in a salute toward the nearby space. Thanks. Shi Haizi's attempt to outsmart him made Lin feel extremely satisfied. And Lin wore a content expression, and he was just about to put the spear back into his storage ring when he turned toward the nearby coffin with a thoughtful expression. He still remembered what he had said in the past. Why don't I fulfill my promise now? Chapter 1056. This spear was imbued with Shi Haizi's Tao intent. If he took the spear back and carefully observed it, he would most likely be able to attain a lot of enlightenment in the Tao of water-type attacks. And Lin could take it back and slowly study it. But in reality, the most suitable person to possess this spear was Lan Xiaoni, who was also a member of the Spirit Fish clan, just like Shi Haizi. He thought about it for a moment before making his way over to Lan Xiaoni and handing the spear over to her. Lan Xiaoni's hands were crossed over her smooth and flat abdomen as she lay silently on the coffin. She looked up at Lin with her bright eyes, and her expression was a little dazed, as if she had yet to come to her senses. She was a little confused. What is it? This spear. And Lin grabbed onto Lan Xiaoni's slender hand and placed the spear in her hand. Take it. This spear belongs to you anyway. I was only taking care of it for you. Studying the power within it will be very beneficial to you. Lan Xiaoni blushed at the sight of Lin holding onto her hand, and she instinctively replied, She then seemed to realize what this spear represented. This was Shi Haizi's inheritance. Lan Xiaoni's eyes widened in shock as she stared at Lin. You're really going to give me a treasure like this? Lin replied in a matter-of-fact manner. This is a reward that I can bestow upon my underlings who have performed well. Lan Xiaoni gripped onto the spear tightly, and tears welled up in her eyes as she burst into tears again. Wah, Big Boss Lin, you're the best. Lin nodded in exasperation at the sight of the mermaid, who was about to burst into tears again, and left her to vent her emotions. He looked at the spatial passageway on the other side of the river and a faint smile appeared on his face. It looks like this tomb isn't very friendly toward foreign living beings. I really want to know how much power you've left behind here. And Lin was already prepared to bash Shi Haizi's statue as soon as he got out of here. If Lan Xiaoni had chosen to run away, then wouldn't he really have died here? He couldn't tolerate this injustice any longer. He had to teach Shi Haizi a lesson. He began to wander around this glowing world, searching for any treasures he might have missed or left behind. Unfortunately, other than a few fire dragons emerging from the flaming river, there didn't seem to be anything special. And Lin even used his powerful body to dive into the depths of the flaming river to investigate the situation. In the end, he only found some abnormally dense fire essence at the bottom of the river. There were no treasures. Sigh, looks like the sea heart stone is the only treasure left. And Lin sighed softly. He had nothing to do, so he returned to the coffin and unleashed his evergreen technique to speed up Lan Xiaoni's recovery. A rich green light lit up the entire space, and Lan Xiaoni lay down comfortably under the green light with her eyes narrowed in bliss. This is probably what love feels like, right? What a beautiful light. Lan Xiaoni couldn't help but praise. Lin, another 2 hours passed. Lan Xiaoni's injuries had been completely healed. An immortal pill, a coffin, and Lin's second stage evergreen technique combined together was no joke. As long as she wasn't dead, her recovery speed was nothing to scoff at. Thank you, Big Boss and Lin, I've recovered. Lan Xiaoni sprang out of the coffin with a dainty smile on her face. Ever since Lin had promised to protect her, she had become a lot less reserved around him, and she had become a lot more intimate with him. And Lin smiled. Seeing as you've recovered, let's go back. All right. Lan Xiaoni nodded obediently. Aside from her straightforward personality, Lan Xiaoni was actually quite easy to get along with. Let's go. I'll take you out of here. And Lin held onto Lan Xiaoni's warm, soft hand as he unleashed his 6 divine flames and 1 holy flame at the same time, materializing a thick suit of flaming armor around their bodies as they charged toward the poisonous mist and scorching flames without any fear. The poisonous mist and flames that almost killed Lan Xiaoni were all repelled by the flames on Lin's armor. They continued onward with an unstoppable force, piercing through the entire perilous realm. Lan Xiaoni looked at Lin beside her with a sense of security in her heart. It was as long as he was here, all difficulties could be easily resolved, and she didn't have to fear any danger. The two of them crossed over the flaming river before entering the spatial passageway that Shi Haizi had opened up. A powerful spatial warp swept over them, and they arrived in an empty room again. And Lin immediately pulled out his evil-slaying sword at the sight of the statue of Shi Haizi. Stinky fish, I'm going to kill you today. He immediately unleashed a sword strike toward the statue as he spoke. An inky black sword projection flashed through the air like a crescent moon, whistling through the air with an extremely powerful might. Boom! A powerful blue enchantment barrier suddenly appeared to block Lin's attack. The statue of Shi Haizi suddenly spoke again. Congratulations to the 2 fated ones for successfully passing the trial of the Black Ball of Light. I hope you can take the treasures and revitalize your tribe. And Lin glowered at Shi Haizi with an enraged expression. Senior Shi Haizi, tell me, why did you try to kill me in the world of the Ball of Light? Has the fairness of the trial of the ancient tomb been fed to dogs by you? The statue of Shi Haizi didn't reply. Instead, it stood silently on the spot like an ordinary statue. And Lin chuckled coldly. He opened the back door, but didn't give an explanation. Was he faking his death? Big Boss and Lin, let's go back. We've already taken the treasures anyway, Lan Xiaoni persuaded in a soft voice. She was actually a little terrified of Shi Haizi. After all, the scene of Shi Haizi nailing Lin to the sea heartstone with his spear was simply too terrifying. Seeing as they had already obtained the treasures, she felt like there was no point in suffering this humiliation. All she had to do was leave silently. However, Lin didn't think the same way. He had almost been played to death, so he was still fuming with rage. He turned toward the statue, only to find that it was staring blankly into space completely motionless. And Lin suddenly yelled, "Shi Haizi, you stupid C asterisk and T." Lan Xiaoni, Shi Haizi didn't respond. And Lin refused to back down. Shi Haizi doesn't have a D asterisk CK. Lan Xiaoni, Shi Haizi suddenly turned and glowered at Lin. F asterisk CK, off now that you've got the treasures. He glowered at Lan Xiaoni as he spoke. Lan Xiaoni's body shuddered, and she hid behind Lin in fear. Shi Haizi. And Lin was ecstatic at the sight of Shi Haizi's darkened expression. Sure enough, Shi Haizi was quite displeased that his treasures had been taken by an outsider. Shi Haizi, aren't you going to give me some compensation for what you've done to me? And Lin didn't leave right away. If you don't leave now, do you want to be nailed by me again? Shi Haizi spoke in a cold voice. And Lin spread open his arms and stared at Shi Haizi with a cold smile on his face. Why don't you come and nail me? Do you really think I'm afraid of you? You're just a remnant power. Let's see how long you can keep up your arrogance. He held a sword in one hand and a mirror in the other, and an extremely mocking smile appeared on his face. Shi Haizi was so enraged that the rocks all over his body began to tremble, and he opened and closed his hands as if he really was going to attack. However, a premonition suddenly made him calm down. I'm sorry, Mr. Lin. This is all my fault. You might not believe me, but this is actually a part of the trial. Furthermore, you've taken all of the treasures, so there's really no compensation. Please leave. Shi Haizi's voice suddenly became gentle and extremely sincere. Lan Xiaoni was astonished as she stared blankly at the scenes unfolding before her eyes. Never would she have thought that Lin would actually make the high priest of the Spirit Fish clan apologize to him. Lin nodded with elation. The treasures aren't the key point. The key point is your attitude. Why didn't you do this from the beginning? Sigh. It's a good thing to learn from one's mistakes. Don't do it again. The veins on Shi Haizi's statue bulged. Chapter 10:57. Lin didn't look at the enraged Shi Haizi. He gestured to Lan Xiaoni before returning to the passageway. He had scolded Shi Haizi and forced Shi Haizi to apologize, so he had achieved his objective. Shi Haizi had almost killed him, but he wasn't crazy enough to attack Shi Haizi with his sword. Shi Haizi didn't want to attack Lin for some reason, but from the enchantment barrier that he had set up, it appeared that he had left behind quite a bit of power. There was no need for Lin to fight to the death with Shi Haizi over something like this. The two of them returned along the passageway before arriving at the fork in the road. There were 2 gates and 1 key. Lin had used the key to open the gate to the tomb treasure vault, but he had lost the opportunity to open the gate to the secrets of the 2 tribes. Those secrets would forever be buried at the bottom of the ocean. Lan Xiaoni looked at the other tightly shut gate with a hint of disappointment before wagging her tail and returning to the main passageway. Hold on, Lin suddenly said. Lan Xiaoni paused and turned around with a confused expression. What is it, Big Boss Lin? Lin pointed to the other tightly shut gate with a smile. Underling Lan, there are secrets that will determine the fate of your tribe inside. Don't you want to go in? Lan Xiaoni didn't expect Lin to bring this up, and she faltered slightly before nodding. I want to go in, but we've already chosen the tomb treasure vault, and we don't have the key anymore. How are we supposed to enter this gate? Who said we have to have a key to enter this gate? The tomb owners said we have to choose one of the 2, so we have to choose one of the 2? And Lin silently drew his evil slaying sword, and his aura exploded forth. As long as you have power, even rules can be broken. Lan Xiaoni's pupils contracted in shock. Could it be that you— That's right, only children do multiple choice questions. I want all of these treasures and secrets. And Lin let loose a clear cry, and a black sword projection flashed through the air before crashing down upon the gate. Terrifying sword might exploded forth, causing the entire passageway to tremor and crack open. A hint of excitement welled up in Lan Xiaoni's heart upon hearing Lin's declaration. Her beautiful eyes stared at the tightly shut door, only to find that there was a faint blue barrier covering the door, which blocked Lin's sword power, and the door remained unscathed. Big Boss Lin, this is a protective spell technique left behind by the High Priestess. How can we break it with our power? Lan Xiaoni was a little disappointed. As your boss, let me teach you another lesson. And Lin gripped his sword with both hands as his aura skyrocketed, climbing straight to the return to void stage. His black cape fluttered wildly behind him as boundless darkness engulfed the surrounding space. Don't say that it's impossible before you give it your all. The evil-slaying sword fell toward the tightly shut gate. At this moment, the world turned dark. Supreme Nightless Sword Slash was released in its strongest form. The pitch-black and domineering sword light contained a supreme sword intent that could devour all things. It instantly devoured the void in its path and crashed into the blue barrier. The quiet slash was accompanied by the crisp sound of something shattering. Kachaboom! The barrier shattered, and the gate behind it also exploded at the same time. Never would the two high priestesses have thought that after so many years, a freakish soul formation stage cultivator would appear and shatter the rules of the tomb. Lan Xiaoni was also dazed for a moment at the sight of the gate that had been destroyed by Enlin. This was a gate that required a key to open, and there were two paths to choose from. This had already become an ingrained concept in her mind. But now, it had been shattered by Enlin in the most violent way possible. That's right. The tomb said that they could only choose one path. So did that mean they could only choose one path? Enlin gave her a different answer, which was that as long as they had enough power, they could choose both paths. Enlin didn't like to play by the rules, and he was becoming more and more arrogant. As such, it was only a matter of time before he came up with this idea. Just as Lan Xiaoni was looking at Enlin with admiration on her face, a loud boom and roar erupted from within the treasure vault passageway. What are you waiting for? Run! Enlin grabbed Lan Xiaoni's hand and immediately ran into the secret passageway between the two tribes. Lan Xiaoni came to her senses, and she was a little fearful as she listened to the roar from the other passageway. Could it be that Senior Shihaizi is caught up to us? Enlin chuckled. Shihaizi is so huge. How could he squeeze into such a narrow passageway? However, we have to be careful in case he attacks us in other ways. We have to end this as quickly as possible. Lan Xiaoni nodded with a firm expression. A blush appeared on her cheeks, and her breathing began to accelerate as a sense of excitement welled up in her heart, as if she were working together with Enlin. The two of them quickly ran along the passageway, but the rumbling behind them didn't die down. He's following us, Lan Xiaoni exclaimed. Enlin's expression darkened slightly. He could sense that Shihaizi's aura was quickly approaching them. It was quite clear that his act of forcefully destroying the gate had completely enraged Shihaizi. This was a very strange phenomenon. He had clearly left behind something for his juniors, but now that his juniors had a chance to obtain the treasures and secrets at the same time, he was suddenly displeased. Who would have thought that such a huge statue could be shrunk down? It's most likely a fake statue. Enlin was a little enraged. Big Boss Enlin, let's not talk about that now. It's understandable that the power left behind by a Dao integration stage mighty figure is a little peculiar. Lan Xiaoni couldn't help but interject, shouldn't we be discussing how to deal with the approaching Shihaizi? Don't worry, I've already made preparations. Enlin wore a confident expression as he said, come out. Gundam 3, Yao Ji, stall that be Astra star for me. Gundam 3 and Yao Ji immediately rushed back after receiving their instructions. The sound of battle erupted. Meanwhile, Enlin and Lan Xiaoni dove headfirst into the secret chamber. This was a secret chamber that was very similar to the treasure vault in the ancient tomb. It was extremely spacious and empty. A gargantuan statue stood at the center of the chamber. This was a huge turtle over a kilometer wide. From the peaceful expression on its face and its eyes, it was most likely a female turtle. Even though I knew that the High Priestess Tianqinji was a turtle, I still find it very difficult to accept after seeing this turtle in person. Is this the person that Shihaizi has been pursuing for several hundred years? Isn't the spirit fish clan's sense of beauty very similar to that of humans? Enlin was a little astonished. Shihaizi pursuing Tianqinji for several hundred years was like a human mighty figure courting a turtle for several hundred years. It was truly incredible. That's why Senior Shihaizi and Senior Tianshinji are true love that transcends species. Lan Xiaoni snuck a glance at Enlin before turning to Tianshinji with a serious expression. Right at this moment, the huge turtle suddenly turned toward Enlin. Foolish human, I'm very displeased that you're discussing my relationship with Shihaizi in front of me. Enlin. Chapter 1058. It's no use. You have no chance of escaping from us. Shihaizi used his power of the divine Tao to knock aside the oncoming Gundam 3 and Yao Ji before making his way toward Lan Xiaoni in a cold voice. Bastard, let little Chin go. Shihaizi flared up with rage upon seeing this. The white eyes of the statue instantly turned crimson. Immediately afterward, a humanoid statue with the tail of a fish and the body of a human rushed into the room before roaring, "Ignore them, little Chun. They've already taken my treasures. They forced open this gate." This was clearly an ancient tomb, so why was the power left behind by the mighty figure within it so powerful and intelligent? And Lin stowed the photographic crystal into his storage ring before looking down at the tortoise beneath his feet with a speechless expression. This is the first time I've seen a mighty figure reveal their secrets so openly. Isn't it obvious that they're doing this for everyone to see? So, this giant tortoise statue was also a living creature? Roar! You're seeking death. How dare you steal the secrets of the two tribes? Lan Xiaoni. A violent collision erupted, accompanied by a female's sharp cry. Holy F***, CK. Why is it so hard? And Lin scratched his head. Tianshinji spoke with a calm expression. You violated the rules of the tomb and trespassed here. I won't tell you the secrets of the tomb, so you should give up now. White light lit up the entire space, instantly imprinting everything within the crystal. You were just cursing at us a moment ago. Why are you welcoming us now? Lan Xiaoni was astonished. What the F***CK was this? Did he have to be so perfunctory? And Lin and Lan Xiaoni drew a sharp intake of breath in unison. Tianshinji was astonished. You were able to break open the enchantment barrier around the gate. Don't think too much about it. I'm only welcoming you as a formality. I actually don't welcome you at all. The giant tortoise's cold voice sounded again. Looks like I'll have to give out new keys. You're not fated to be here, so you can stay here. Tianshinji spoke in a cold voice that was filled with supreme authority. Lan Xiaoni was also struck by a powerful force, and she threw up a mouthful of blood before tumbling to the ground. Boom! And Lin's reaction was extremely fast. He instantly tossed the recording crystal into the sky. Big Boss and Lin, Tianshinji's turtle shell seems to have the ancient text of our tribe engraved on it. Lan Xiaoni stared intently at the patterns on the turtle's back as she suddenly spoke. However, it seemed like Tianshinji didn't know that they had broken in. Was it because it had only woken up after they had entered the room? Tianshinji, who had remained calm all this while, finally flew into a rage. You don't know *T. The most dangerous place is also the safest place. Shihaizi suddenly interjected on behalf of his Tao partner. However, the tortoise made of crystals emitted a dazzling multicolored brilliance and blocked Enlin's sword slash unscathed. Enlin was a little confused. He was already used to striking first, so he would naturally place the safety of his own side first. Controlling Tianshinji was the best way to deal with this crisis. Enlin was also puzzled. Why did his attitude change so quickly? Splitting the turtle shell? She quickly realized who it was, and she repressed the urge to scream out loud. The half-crippled Gundam 3 and Yao Ji were also stowed away at this moment. The two silver Gundams flew through the air before tumbling to the ground in the cavernous room, where sparks flew from their bodies. And Lin knew that he had misspoken, and he immediately apologized. I'm sorry, Senior Tianshinji. We came here to obtain the secrets of the two tribes and change the fate of the two tribes so that we can lead the two tribes to glory again. Enlin, I know the most dangerous place, but the safest place. I don't see it at all. This was an adaptation of Enlin's 6 strikes of the war god Shadow Tiger technique. It created absolute darkness that deprived one of one's five senses and divine sense. But instead of attacking, it chose to flee. At this moment, Tian Qingji's body suddenly became crystalline. Crap! Tian Qingji's expression shifted. And Lin and Lan Xiaoni didn't even get a chance to be praised before they were slapped in the face. Heavenly Turtle, Seabed, Purgatory, Maximum Difficulty, Hell Mode, Activate. A sense of extreme danger welled up in Lin's heart, and he slashed down with his sword without any hesitation. And Lin felt as if his body had been struck by a massive hammer, and his extremely powerful body of the war god felt as if it were being torn apart as his body flew backward. Tian Qingji, can you move your sword away from my neck before you say that? Tian Qingji turned toward Lin with a cold expression. The giant turtle didn't even get a chance to finish its sentence before a resounding boom erupted from outside the gate. He didn't get a chance to say anything before the giant turtle continued. Fated one, welcome to the tomb of me and Shi Haizi. Not only that, but Tian Qingji also opened her mouth to blast forth several extremely terrifying beams of divine light. These beams of divine light pierced through space before instantly striking Lin's body and exploding violently. And Lin, boom! The extremely sharp black sword radiance struck Tian Qingji's head, and the remaining power of the sword radiance even split the vast stone chamber in half. However, this powerful water-type spell technique exploded into countless droplets of water in the face of Tian Qingji's glare. Lan Xiaoni discovered that she was suddenly being carried toward the exit. She didn't want to defeat Tian Qingji. All she wanted was to stall her enemy for a moment. And Lin, in front of them, a blue energy barrier appeared. The special power of the tomb was activated, and an extremely fearsome spatial power instantly enshrouded Lin and Lan Xiaoni, upon which the two of them disappeared on the spot. Boom! Tears welled up in Lan Xiaoni's eyes as she rubbed her nose, which was red from the impact. A resigned smile appeared on Lin's face, but his evil-slaying sword remained pressed against Tian Qingji's neck without moving. You want to run? Tian Qingji's cold chuckle sounded. So be it. I don't want to use too much of my remaining power to deal with you. In order to preserve my power, I'll have to ask you to go to your two tribes to die. He was just feeling a little relieved that Tian Qingji hadn't detected that they had forced their way in when Shi Haizi suddenly appeared to disrupt their plans. The entire space instantly became inky black. Tian Qingji spoke in a cold voice. Wouldn't it be the safest place to go if we kill all of the beings who have discovered this secret by violating the rules? And Lin's brows furrowed slightly. He clearly couldn't think of a way out of this predicament. Big Boss and Lan Xiaoni let loose a cry of surprise as she hurriedly made a series of hand seals to summon a massive wave over 1 kilometer tall, which swept toward the giant turtle. Tian Qingji's expression eased slightly upon hearing this. I'm very pleased that you were able to choose between the treasure and the secret of your two tribes. You are all outstanding juniors who know how to look at the bigger picture. And Lin silently pulled out his evil-slaying sword. Senior, we only barged into this gate in order to change the fate of the Heavenly Turtle Tribe and the Spirit Fish Clan. Please tell us the secret of your two tribes for the sake of the future of your two tribes. Chapter 10:59. And Lin was struck by a rush of dizziness. In the next instant, a blue ocean world appeared before his eyes. Boundless water pressure swept toward them, but it was kept at bay by the blue barrier of light unleashed by Lan Xiaoni. And Lin looked around at this continent to find that the ground was completely black, but there were all types of plants that glowed with different colors growing all over it, illuminating the entire underwater world. A series of strange-looking sea mutant beasts were floating around, and their crimson eyes glowed with a dangerous light as they unleashed their powerful auras to their heart's content. They were originally swimming around slowly, but their bodies faltered at the sight of Lin before pouncing toward Lin with their cavernous mouths. It was as if this foreign living being was something that they had to eliminate. These pieces of trash think they can hurt me. And Lin drew his evil-slaying sword and unleashed one powerful sword projection after another, instantly slicing the oncoming sea mutant beasts into mincemeat. Blood stained the ocean red, and the stench of blood wafted through the air, attracting even more sea mutant beasts. All of them roared as they pounced toward Lin, and there was no lack of soul formation stage soul beasts among them. And Lin was like a meat grinder as he led Lan Xiaoni onward, and all of the monsters that approached him were sliced into mincemeat. They continued onward toward the center of the continent, and Lin was feeling extremely vexed by these monsters. It wasn't that these sea mutant beasts were all very powerful, but rather that there were simply too many of them. They were attacking almost non-stop, and anyone would be frustrated if they had to constantly swing their swords. Lan Xiaoni's features paled with fear. If it weren't for Lin's presence, she would most likely become food in the stomachs of these ferocious beasts in no time. Roar! One sea mutant beast after another roared as they pounced toward Lin. Some of them were even unleashing powerful sea spell techniques, such as water blades, engulfment vortexes, or lethal poison attacks. There was simply too much to handle, and Lin was able to vanquish all of the attacks with brute force, and all of them were sliced apart with a single sword strike. This was most likely what it meant to be able to vanquish all spells with a single sword strike. Damn it! Haven't we already obtained the secrets of the two races? Could this so-called heavenly turtle seabed purgatory be a mystic realm with other rewards? And Lin asked as he fought. It could also be the trial to obtain the secret of the two tribes. Even though we've obtained the secret, we still have to fight our enemies. Perhaps this is the equivalent of a supplementary ticket? A thoughtful expression appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face as she speculated, and Lin's veins were popping out. What the F***CK was he talking about? Why did he have to pay for a ticket when he had forcefully taken the secret information with his own strength? Speaking of which, Tian Qingji wants to use the power of the trial to eliminate us, right? But isn't it wishful thinking to kill me with this level of exotic beast? And Lin sneered. He could sense that the potential of these marine beasts had been completely stimulated, and they had obtained strength far beyond their usual level. However, this power was enough to scare Lan Xiaoni, but it was nothing to him. Boss and Lin is the best. How could Tian Qingji possibly have the insight to estimate your strength? These monsters are just for you to practice your sword arts on, Lan Xiaoni praised in a very natural manner. Underling Lan was becoming more and more adept at cheering him on, and Lin was very pleased as Lan Xiaoni was telling the truth. How? A dragon venom whale over 10,000 feet in length let loose a wail of anguish as it was sliced in half by Lin's sword. Through the two halves of the massive whale's body, and Lin could see that there was an extremely peculiar ship floating on the continent up ahead. This ship was extremely massive, as if it were a massive beast of the deep sea resting on the continent. And Lin estimated that the ship was over 50 kilometers in length, and it was impossible to see the end of it. Just the size of the ship alone struck him with a sense of boundless pressure. A series of inky black cannons extended from within the ship, each of which had a diameter of over a kilometer, creating an extremely intimidating sight. This was undoubtedly an extremely fearsome battleship. However, there were countless massive holes, cracks, and gashes that extended for tens of thousands of meters, further accentuating just how dilapidated this battleship was. As time passed, many glowing underwater plants crawled over the hull of the battleship. The alloy and plants intertwined with one another, causing the dilapidated battleship to exude a peculiar light, making it appear as if it were a beautiful relic that had been left behind. This ship is so beautiful, Lan Xiaoni couldn't help but exclaim. And Lin nodded. In a place like this, the more beautiful something is, the more careful we have to be. Then what do we do? Do we go in? Lan Xiaoni recoiled slightly upon hearing this, and she began to cower again. Of course we have to go in. We won't be able to get out unless we kill the core monsters inside. We can only rely on the mechanisms of the mystic realm to escape from here. And Lin heaved a forlorn sigh. Lan Xiaoni nodded upon hearing this, before carefully trailing behind Lin with Baizhu in her hand. As for her second trump card, the little blue fish, she had already sacrificed it when she rescued Lin. If she wanted to activate it again, she would have to wait until she got back and ask High Priest Yu Feiyu to summon its soul again. The two of them continued to approach the massive battleship. All of the sea monsters that were charging toward Lin with no regard for their own safety suddenly stopped after approaching the battleship, as if there was something extremely terrifying within the battleship that struck fear into their hearts and made them unwilling to approach it. And Lin became even more cautious upon seeing this. The closer they got to the battleship, the more insignificant they felt. The two of them first arrived in front of a cannon. This cannon is so huge, it could probably raise an entire island to the ground with a single shot. And Lin clicked his tongue in wonder as he looked at the black cannon. Big Boss and Lin, are we getting too close to the cannon? What if it suddenly fires at us? Lan Xiaoni's heart thumped wildly at the sight of the gargantuan cannon. The cannon had a diameter of over a kilometer, and there was no end in sight. Haha, fire? And Lin couldn't help but burst into laughter as he flicked Lan Xiaoni's forehead. This massive battleship has been abandoned for who knows how many years. Not only is it extremely old, but it's also in such a tattered state. It's only there to scare people. How can it still be used? And Lin was looking at Lan Xiaoni with an amused expression on his face. Lan Xiaoni stared blankly ahead, and she couldn't help but pat Lin's shoulder. Big Boss and Lin, look, that cannon seems to be glowing, and Lin turned to look at her. At this moment, a light as bright as the sun was already radiating from the cannon's black hole. And Lin, boom, an earth-shattering boom erupted. A golden ball of energy exploded on the seabed, and boundless scorching energy swept forth, melting all of the nearby sea monsters into nothingness. Destructive flames lit up the inky black seabed as if it were day. A massive mushroom cloud erupted into the sky, creating a unique sight on the seabed. Chapter 1060. A fearsome explosion erupted on the continent. Violent waves of water swept through all living beings within a radius of over 50 kilometers. Some were knocked flying, others had their bodies torn apart, and all of the sea mutant beasts fled for their lives. The fearsome energy gradually dissipated. A gargantuan crater had appeared at the center of the explosion. Cough, cough, cough. That was way too terrifying. Was it necessary to use a cannon to kill a mosquito? At the center of the crater, a huge black brick was pushed aside, and Lin crawled out from Lan Xiaoni's arms in a disheveled manner. That's right, he had pulled out his chaotic alloy brick in this dire situation and placed it in front of Lan Xiaoni again. So he was unfortunately sandwiched again. It was a pity that the one who suffered the most was not Lin. Instead, it was Lan Xiaoni who was at the very back. Lan Xiaoni's body was far too soft, so it was quite comfortable for Lin to crash into her. Instead, it was Lan Xiaoni who was half dead from being rammed into by Lin. Underling Lan, are you all right? And Lin shook the unconscious Lan Xiaoni with a concerned expression. Lan Xiaoni slowly regained consciousness, and tears almost flowed from her eyes as she rubbed her body, which was about to fall apart. Thankfully, she knew that she couldn't cry at a critical moment like this, so she forced herself to hold back her tears. I'm fine. Lan Xiaoni stood up with difficulty and massaged her sore chest as she looked up at the massive battleship with a fearful expression. Big Boss and Lin, this battleship can fire cannons. What we do? And Lin replied with a serious expression. Running away won't solve any problems, so what we have to do is evade the cannons and kill the captain. Lan Xiaoni was astonished. Are you sure there's something called captain on this ship? And Lin, that's not the point. The point is that we can't back down. Thus, the two of them reached an agreement and approached the massive battleship again. They had learned their lesson this time, and they evaded the cannons of the battleship before approaching the bow of the battleship. Under normal circumstances, powerful living beings usually commanded everything at the bow of the battleship. They flew toward the bow of the battleship while unleashing their divine senses to the fullest extent in order to survey their surroundings. Not a single sea monster dared approach the enormous warship. Even though it was surrounded by sea plants and was as dazzling as a pearl, it still appeared incredibly calm. Even the radiance it emitted was cold. It was this deathly silent atmosphere that made Lin a little nervous. There seems to be a creature up ahead. And Lin's expression changed slightly as he spoke softly. It's a living being from our spirit fish clan. Lan Xiaoni was able to detect this being through her bloodline connection. On the bow deck, the floor was paved with special dark golden essence wood, and there were large and small pits and cracks. Those weren't marks left behind by time, but marks left behind by battles. Many skeletons were scattered across the vast deck. Even though they had been dead for so long, they were still releasing powerful energy waves. It was obvious that their owners were very powerful when they were alive. And Lin looked at the appearance of the skeleton and felt that it was very unfamiliar. Not only was the appearance of the bones extremely strange, but there were also sharp bone spurs on the surface like a bone hedgehog. He then looked toward the end of the deck to find a mermaid standing outside the control room of the warship. The mermaid had a slender figure, and her pink fishtail rippled through the air as her body hovered in the air. Her inky black hair fell to her waist and danced in the wind. What was worth mentioning was that she was even more scantily clad than Lan Xiaoni. Only her 2 seashell pieces were protecting her chest, leaving her fair, smooth skin completely exposed. And Lin couldn't help but sigh with emotion. The ancient people sure were open-minded, and he couldn't help but take a few more glances at her with condemnation in his eyes. Lan Xiaoni rolled her eyes upon seeing the change in Lin's expression. She was clearly more beautiful than the mermaid with the pink fishtail. So why was Lin's attention on her? Could it be that wearing scantily clad made it easier for her to attract attention? The mermaid crossed her arms and slowly spread open her pink folding fans as a suffocating, killing intent appeared in her eyes at the sight of Lin and the others. "Are you the people my master wants to eliminate?" the mermaid asked in a cold voice. Lan Xiaoni's heart tightened as she prepared for battle, and Lin immediately shook his head. "No." The mermaid faltered slightly upon hearing this. Lan Xiaoni. The atmosphere seemed to have congealed for a split second. The mermaid's train of thought was momentarily disjointed, and she turned to Lin with an embarrassed expression. "My name is Star Dancer, and I am the 9th captain of the Starfire battleship of the Spirit Fish clan." Lan Xiaoni immediately let loose a cry of surprise. "This ancient battleship is the Starfire battleship." And Lin blinked with confusion. "What's the Starfire battleship?" "It's the core strategic weapon of our Spirit Fish clan. It's a mobile battle fortress constructed from all types of star essence stones, and its power is unfathomable. It's said that it can battle Tao integration stage super mighty figures head-on. It mysteriously disappeared during the battle against the ancient heavenly fiend celestial. Who would have thought that it would be found here?" Cold sweat was pouring down Lan Xiaoni's forehead as she tugged on Lin's sleeve. "Big Boss and Lin, this Starfire battleship doesn't look like it's completely destroyed, and there are many weapons that can pose a threat to your safety. You have to be careful." "You're not going to tell me to be careful of the Star Dancer?" And Lin was a little perplexed. This senior Star Dancer is clearly nothing more than some kind of residual power. She was at the Return to Void pinnacle stage when she was alive, so there's no way that much power would remain after her death. Big Boss and Lin isn't even afraid of Tian Chenji and Shihaizi, so why would he be afraid of her? And Lin's lips twitched upon hearing this, and he felt like this made a lot of sense. It had to be said that Lan Xiaoni was very confident in Big Boss and Lin. The Star Dancer chuckled coldly upon hearing this. "Looks like I've been underestimated. So be it. I'll make you pay for your underestimation with your deaths." And Lin immediately waved a hand at Lan Xiaoni upon hearing this. "Get away from me and yell 666. Lan Xiaoni pursed her lips. She knew that she wouldn't be of much help in a battle of this caliber, so she immediately fled the battlefield. It was also at this moment that an extremely terrifying aura soared into the sky. The Star Dancer waved her fan with her left hand. Rising wind. The hurricane swept toward Lin's body with a boundless torrent of water. and Lin assessed the Star Dancer to be around the return to Void intermediate stage in his mind as he sensed her terrifying power. Of course, an attack of this caliber wouldn't be able to harm him. Falling stars. The fan in the Star Dancer's right hand also began to descend. The light at the bottom of the ocean suddenly dimmed. A sense of peril suddenly welled up in Lin's heart, and he was just about to spring into action when the torrent of water around him suddenly became like powerful tentacles that restricted his movements. So the rising wind attack was only a feint, and the Star Dancer's true intention was to restrict his movements. All of this was in preparation for her falling stars attack. And Lin had only just struggled free from the torrent of water when boundless stars imbued with the power of the Star Divine Tao fell like a torrential downpour, sealing off all avenues of retreat. And Lin was astonished. Wasn't the Star Dancer a remnant power of the return to Void Pinnacle stage? Why was she so adept at using the power of the Divine Tao? He didn't even get a chance to do anything before his body was engulfed by countless specks of blue stars. Chapter 1061. An attack imbued with the power of the Divine Tao was more than enough to break through in Lin's body of the war god's defenses. Boom, boom, boom. A vast expanse of starlight exploded in front of the Starfire battleship as blue energy wreaked havoc, disintegrating the water at the bottom of the ocean into a vacuum. A smile appeared on the Star Dancer's face as she looked at Lin, who had been engulfed by the starlight. Arrogant brat. Don't you know what hell mode entails? This means that I can unleash the power I had when I was alive for a short period of time. See, this is what you get for underestimating me. Boom! A massive hole was suddenly torn open in the blue starlight, and a blood-stained white figure charged toward Lin at an extremely fast speed. The Star Dancer's eyelids twitched. Star leap. Streams of wind revolve around Lin's evil-slaying sword as it fell. The domineering sharpness was invincible, tearing open a dark trail of absolute vacuum at the bottom of the water. Meanwhile, the Star Dancer disappeared on the spot like a shooting star in a flash. And Lin's wind sword missed its target, and at this moment, a pink fan adorned with blue stars swept toward Lin at an even faster speed. The Star Dancer instantly appeared beside Lin before mercilessly swinging her fan toward Lin's head. Bam! The space around him was flattened and shattered. Lin felt as if he had been viciously slapped in the face, and his body flew through the air like a cannonball as a vast, mountain-toppling force swept toward him. Flame shooting star. The Star Dancer twisted her slender waist and waved her fan through the air again. The vast power of the Divine Tao fused into the fan, and a flaming star that was capable of incinerating all things appeared in the blink of an eye. The terrifying temperatures instantly made the seawater within a radius of close to 10 kilometers churn and churn. And Lin couldn't help but grumble at the sight of the oncoming flaming star. Using the power of flames at the bottom of the ocean? Are you insane? Shouldn't you be using the power of water? A cold smile appeared on the Star Dancer's face. As you wish. She waved her other fan through the air. Cold star. A bright blue star pierced through the air at an even faster speed than the flaming star, freezing the seawater in its wake into glacial ice. Even though there was still some distance between them, and Lin found that his movements had become much slower. It was clear that fire and ice restrained each other. However, the Star Dancer was able to unleash the power of these two stars at the same time, and not only did they not cancel each other out, they were instead mutually reinforcing one another, making the fiery meteor even hotter while the cold star became even colder. And Lin knew that his body wouldn't be able to withstand this ice and fire dual heavens technique. His path of retreat had already been sealed, so he had no choice but to take out the chaotic alloy brick again and use it as a shield. At the same time, he conjured his divine flame armor. Boom! The seawater within a radius of 10,000 meters was incinerated and frozen. The two stars collided with the black brick, but a portion of the resulting explosion bypassed the black brick and struck Lin instead. After all, this was an area of effect attack. The black brick couldn't completely block it. The destructive power crashed into Enlin's flaming armor, upon which it was instantly pulverized. Enlin was struck again. Even though the energy had been significantly weakened, his organs were still damaged by the scorching and cold powers at the same time, and blood trickled down the corners of his lips. Who would have thought that you would be able to last so long against me? A hint of surprise appeared in the Star Dancer's eyes, but she didn't stop there. Instead, she lashed her tail through the air toward Enlin. Enlin stood on the spot, panting heavily. His body was charred black, and his hair had been burned to a crisp, but there were also shards of ice on his body. It was quite clear that this ice and fire dual heavens technique was a little too much for him. A smug expression appeared on the Star Dancer's face upon seeing Enlin's current state. She quickly closed in on him, and the power of the divine Tao erupted from her fans again as she prepared to deliver the final blow to Enlin. Die! A cold voice sounded. She knew that Enlin was already at the end of his tether. The Star Dancer's attacks were extremely swift and decisive, and her fans danced through the air in a graceful dance. The edges of her pink star fan suddenly became as crimson as blood, and the power of the divine Tao, imbued with the power of the stars, imbued with the power of the divine Tao, imbued with the power of the stars, slicing Enlin's body into 3 sections like a pair of scythes. However, before she even had a chance to smile in victory, the 3 sections of her body melted into the ocean like liquid. The Star Dancer's pupils contracted. A water clone? The space around her suddenly plunged into boundless darkness. Origin energy of the netherworld. Shadow Tiger. Enlin's power had suddenly skyrocketed, and he unleashed a sword strike that he had been preparing for a long time with his evil slaying sword, catching the Star Dancer off guard. The Star Dancer wanted to parry or evade, but it was already too late. Whoosh! The evil slaying sword sliced a massive gash into her snowy white skin, extending from her collarbone all the way to her waist. If it weren't for the fact that she had activated her power of the divine Tao to defend herself, she would have most likely been sliced in half. The Star Dancer let loose a pained moan as she hurtled back in retreat, and her blood quickly dissipated in the water. Light returned to heaven and earth. Enlin continued to press his advantage as he tossed his evil-slaying sword through the air. 6 strikes of the war god, 100-sword technique. 99 white, celestial swords materialized in the blink of an eye. Even though they were deep in the ocean, the peerlessly sharp sword intent was still able to slice through the seawater to create a vacuum zone. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. 99 celestial swords flew toward the Star Dancer. The Star Dancer gritted her teeth as she quickly swung her fans toward the powerful celestial swords in order to defend herself against Enlin's relentless attacks. The flying swords clashed with one another, and the surging currents transformed the ocean floor into a perilous realm. The Star Dancer blocked the 99 sword strikes with extreme difficulty. The 100th sword formed by the evil-slaying sword sliced through the dark currents, parting the ethereal space before instantly striking the Star Dancer's fans with extremely powerful sword intent. The white sword projection pierced through the air for several kilometers with unstoppable force. The Star Dancer's petite body was propelled into the battleship by the sword projection, where she crashed through the extremely sturdy alloy walls. Enlin heaved a light sigh of relief at the sight of the Star Dancer being slashed into the battleship. He was just about to give chase when another resounding boom suddenly erupted. This was an extremely long and drawn-out boom, as if it were going to erupt throughout heaven and earth. The Starfire battleship, which stretched as far as the eye could see, suddenly began to glow with a faint blue light. I admit that you're quite powerful, but that's as far as you can go. I've already fused as one with the Starfire battleship, so you're about to face the power of the entire Starfire battleship. The Star Dancer's voice sounded again, and there was a hint of madness and determination in her voice. Enlin stared at the massive battleship before him with astonishment on his face. Fused as one with the battleship? Do you think you're ship girl? His voice had only just fallen when the countless cannons at the top of the battleship turned toward the tiny human in the blink of an eye. The Star Dancer's mocking voice sounded, I'm a professional at killing mosquitoes with cannons. Unlin. Chapter 1062. An extremely powerful sense of peril welled up in Enlin's heart. He immediately pulled out his brick and positioned it in front of him. The cannons at the top of the battleship weren't as large as the cannons on either side, but that didn't mean they were any weaker. On the contrary, the cannons at the top of the battleship were the true main cannons. Just as these thoughts were running through his mind, one of the cannons opened fire. There was no boom, which was a rare occurrence. Instead, the energy rippled outward like a fan, instantly enshrouding Enlin within as an extremely powerful spatial sealing power emanated from it. Enlin's expression shifted. Realm-piercing nail. A red streak of light pierced through space and broke through the spatial sealing power. At this moment, a golden light burst forth like the sun. Boom, boom, boom. 9 extremely powerful electromagnetic cannons were fired at the same time at an undetectable speed. The seawater surged violently, sending shockwaves hundreds of kilometers away. Each of the electromagnetic cannons was powerful enough to pulverize a return to Void Stage Mighty Figure's body. Enlin had only just broken through the spatial sealing power, so he didn't have any time to evade. Just like that, the electromagnetic cannon struck the black brick with extreme accuracy, and its terrifying power instantly tore through Enlin's defensive barrier before knocking him back several dozen kilometers along with the brick. However, this was only a prelude. It was a prelude to opening up distance. It was a way to protect the battleship from the terrifying shockwaves. A dark red cannon had already finished charging. Boom! An earth-shattering boom erupted. Red energy erupted forth, instantly annihilating the seawater in its wake and shattering the space in its wake. It struck Enlin's brick at a speed faster than lightning. The Starfire battleship's main cannon, the Starfire Annihilation Cannon, had been fired. In that instant, the red energy was imbued with the power of annihilation, engulfing everything around it, creating a circular space of annihilation that annihilated all the elements within. Big Boss Enlin. Lan Xiaoni's features paled, and she finally couldn't help but yell. She had warned Enlin to be careful of the Starfire battleship, but what she was most worried about still happened. The Star Dancer had the authority to control the Starfire battleship. Not only that, but she could also use the Starfire battleship's main energy cannon. That was a cannon that could blast Tao Integration Stage super mighty figures. Even though he could only unleash less than a tenth of his original power, this was still a power that could pose a threat to Tao Integration Stage super mighty figures. How could Soul Formation Stage cultivators like them imagine this? Lan Xiaoni was extremely concerned about Enlin's situation, but she didn't dare to go over. She was afraid that she would only cause trouble for Enlin if she went over, so she was at a complete loss for what to do. However, just because she did not move did not mean that the warship would spare her. Both she and Enlin were existences that the 2 high priests had ordered to be eliminated. The position she was standing at was actually within the range of the battleship's perception. The reason why they hadn't dealt with her before was because she posed little threat. That was why they had made Enlin their top priority. One of the cannons began to turn toward Lan Xiaoni. Lan Xiaoni's expression shifted, and she didn't even have a chance to evade before the energy cannon blasted forth, sending devastating flames hurtling toward her. Her petite body was like duckweed on the ocean that was about to be engulfed by the massive waves. Right at this moment, an inky black crescent moon sliced the oncoming energy cannon in half, as if it were a rock parting a river. A familiar figure once again appeared in front of her. Tears welled up in Lan Xiaoni's eyes. Big Boss Enlin, I'm so glad you're all right. Enlin looked at the battleship in the distance. You didn't even spare a useless fish. Is this how you should behave as an ancestor of the Spirit Fish clan? Lan Xiaoni. Even though Enlin seemed to be protecting her, why did it sound so heart-wrenching? A heart-wrenching feeling welled up in the mermaid princess heart. You've broken the rules of the tomb. You're not the fated ones that Master is looking for, so you should be punished. The Star Dancer's voice sounded again. At the same time, countless cannons began to turn toward Enlin and Lan Xiaoni. The pitch-black mouths of the cannons were completely silent, but an extremely terrifying sense of pressure began to sweep toward them. Even the energy cannon on the front of your battleship can't do anything to me, so what do you have to deal with me? Unlin's expression remained calm as a cold smile appeared on his face, and he appeared to be extremely confident. In reality, he was actually quite scared. The chaotic alloy brick wasn't the only reason why that cannon blast had been unleashed. It was all thanks to Gundam 3 in Yao Ji, who had just recovered from absorbing spirit stones, that he was able to survive the blast at the cost of being crippled again. If another cannon blast like the one just now were unleashed, he would most likely be severely wounded. Lan Xiaoni's heart began to race at the sight of so many cannons, and she silently hid behind Enlin. She adjusted her position and prepared a cushioning spell technique so that her chest wouldn't be crushed by Enlin's back again. She was quite familiar with this tactic. Don't worry, I won't disappoint you. No return to Void Stage mighty figure will be able to defend against my next attack. The Star Dancer's voice sounded again, and Lin chuckled. I'm a Soul Formation Stage powerful being. Just because Return to Void Stage mighty figures can't defend against it doesn't mean I can't defend against it. The Starfire battleship fell silent, as if it were feeling a little awkward. A few seconds later, boundless white light converged on a certain circular pattern on the battleship. That's a Starry Sky formation. She's going to fuse her power of the Star Divine Tao into the battleship to unleash the Starry Sky cannon. Lan Xiaoni's expression shifted as she spoke in a panicked voice. At this moment, an extremely terrifying aura began to proliferate through the air, and the patterns on the formation connected with the power of the stars before quickly converging and amplifying. The massive battleship, over 50 kilometers in size, lit up as if it was infusing all of the power of this massive seabed beast into this attack. And Lin suddenly burst into laughter. Come on, let me see the battleship's most powerful attack. Don't disappoint me. Big Boss and Lin, the Starfire battleship's most powerful attack is the Star-Shattering Cannon. Not this, Lan Xiaoni cautioned. And Lin, can't you let me show off first? Why are you bickering with me at a time like this? Just as Enlin turned to Lan Xiaoni with a resentful expression, boom! The power of the Starry Sky formation was completely unleashed. The Star Dancer's power of the Divine Tao erupted forth with its most powerful might. Countless dazzling stars were swept along by the white energy like a river, and they were like a boundless galaxy that instantly engulfed Enlin and Lan Xiaoni. However, a strange turn of events also unfolded at this moment. The terrifying river of stars was engulfed by something, as if it had fallen into a bottomless pit. At the same time, another dazzling river of stars erupted forth with unstoppable power before instantly crashing into the Starfire battleship, tearing through its thick protective barrier before hurtling toward a certain direction. And Lin held the vermilion bird mirror in his hand as he looked in the direction the river of stars was hurtling toward. His target wasn't the cannons on the battleship. Instead, his target was the place where he could detect the most powerful energy fluctuations with his divine sense. That place was most likely the core of the battleship. That's right, and Lin was planning to use the Starfire battleship's trump card to kill this battleship. Chapter 1063. The Starry Sky formation could be said to be one of the Starfire battleship's most powerful offensive techniques. Its power was directly proportional to the pilot's power. In order to kill Enlin, the Star Dancer had elevated her cultivation base to the Return to Void Pinnacle stage in a short time. The Starry Sky array diagram that she used could be said to be her strongest trump card. However, this was the ultimate killing move that she had placed her hopes on. Now, it had actually changed its direction and was fiercely sweeping towards her. It was not attacking the battleship that she was piloting. Instead, it was attacking where she was. Within a golden energy crystal, a pink-tailed mermaid's eyes widened with shock and horror. How could this be? He's only a Soul Formation Stage cultivator. How does he know where I am? The Star Dancer's expression shifted drastically, and she was no longer able to maintain her composure. She hurriedly activated a defensive enchantment barrier. However, How could a commander without any help and a hastily constructed defense withstand the attack of the Starry Sky Formation? A crisp crack erupted, and the barrier was broken. The river of stars swept through the barrier with unstoppable force before crashing into the golden energy crystal. Boom! Energy erupted forth, and the entire battleship tremored violently as the blue light around it gradually dimmed. Lan Xiaoni's eyes were tightly shut, and she was prepared to be crushed by Enlin. However, she discovered that Enlin was standing before her completely unscathed, as if he were an immovable divine mountain. He can even reflect such a terrifying spell technique, so powerful. Lan Xiaoni opened her eyes and stared blankly at the scenes unfolding before her eyes as she exclaimed in amazement. A faint smile appeared on Enlin's face. "You find a place to hide first. I'll be back soon." Wings of wind spread open on the man's back as he spoke, and a torrent of water erupted as he hurtled toward the center of the explosion at an extremely fast speed. Enlin made his way through the passageway of destruction, and after arriving at the center of the explosion, he slashed his evil-slaying sword forward, upon which a powerful sword intent sliced through the violent turbulence. He heaved a long sigh of relief at the sight of the shattered golden crystals on the ground. I made the right bet. This is the core of the battleship, after all. I was operating such a massive battleship on my own, but I still ended up exposing myself. A relieved smile appeared on Enlin's face. If the core was more hidden, his situation would be several times more dangerous than before. But where did the Star Dancer go? Was she blasted into smithereens? Enlin looked around for traces of the mermaid, but he couldn't find a single fish scale. He picked up the golden energy crystal fragments from the ground. These things had a very high energy density, so they should be of some use. Enlin searched the surroundings carefully and finally found a deep sea blue essence with sculpture under one of the gravel. This statue was only around the size of a palm, and it bore a strong resemblance to the Star Dancer. It had a cold and haughty expression on its face, and it held a pair of folding fans in its hands. Not only were their appearances similar, but even their residual auras were very similar. Enlin, I was almost killed by a wooden sculpture. Little brother Lan, come here quickly. Enlin shouted. Lan Xiaoni immediately flew toward Enlin upon hearing this. What is it, Big Boss Enlin? What's the deal with this wooden sculpture? Enlin tossed the wooden sculpture to Lan Xiaoni. Lan Xiaoni caught the wooden sculpture with a blank expression, and her eyes gradually lit up. Wow, what a beautiful wooden sculpture. It looks so much like Senior Star Dancer. Is this a present for me? The mermaid princess held the wooden sculpture with a blissful smile on her face. Enlin, I'm asking you to analyze if this thing has anything to do with the Star Dancer. Enlin grumbled. Lan Xiaoni came to her senses, and a blush appeared on her face as she turned toward the wooden sculpture of the Star Dancer. After a while, she said, this wooden sculpture was constructed from the divine wood of the Spirit Fish Clan's Hong Meng sacrificial altar. It looks like it's a vessel for her residual power. The residual power of the Star Dancer has been dispersed by you, so this sculpture has naturally lost its purpose. Enlin faltered slightly upon hearing this before a hint of elation and incredulity appeared on his face. So that means I've already defeated that Spirit Fish Clan mighty figure? From the current situation, that appears to be the case. Lan Xiaoni nodded. Enlin nodded with a slightly wistful expression. His victory was far too simple and brutal, and he was struggling to accept it. He had thought that he would be able to battle the battleship maiden for another 300 rounds. Enlin thought for a moment before swallowing another high-rank blood spirit pill in a fit of excitement. Wait, I have another question. A panicked expression suddenly appeared on Enlin's face. Lan Xiaoni looked at him. The Star Dancer is a top-rate mighty figure of the Spirit Fish Clan, as well as the controller of the Starfire battleship, so she can be considered the final boss of this world, right? Enlin spoke in a slow voice. Of course. Lan Xiaoni nodded with a confused expression. So what are you trying to say? Enlin's brows furrowed tightly. According to the rules of the Trial Worlds, aren't we supposed to be teleported out after we destroy the final boss? Then, Lan Xiaoни's mouth gaped open, and her hands trembled with fright, causing the wooden carving to almost fall to the ground. We can't go back? And Lin heaved a forlorn sigh. There are only two possibilities. The first is that we still have a final boss to fight, and the second is that Tian Qingji and Shi Haizi have shamelessly changed the rules of the trial. Both of them knew that the first possibility was almost impossible. The Star Dancer controlling the Starfire battleship was already the limit of what this world could handle. Tian Qingji had said that she was going to use the power of this world to kill them. But even if she couldn't kill them, she could use this world to trap them forever and suffocate them to death. And Lin and Lan Xiaoni were both struck by despair. Lan Xiaoni couldn't help but let loose a torrent of abuse. Not only did they use their power to set up the hellish difficulty trial, but they even changed the rules of being teleported back after killing the enemy. Are they that shameless? They're a disgrace to the High Priestess. They said we broke the rules, but they're breaking their own rules. Why aren't they saying anything? This is a blatant double standard. They're just trash. Stinky sea urchins. Useless sea cucumbers. She didn't care about her own position anymore as she unleashed a torrent of abuse. She didn't forget to smash the wooden carving viciously into the ground as she spoke. Bam! A loud shattering sound erupted. The wooden carving had been smashed into smithereens by the enraged Lan Xiaoni. A golden key then appeared before Lin and Lan Xiaoni. And Lin was astonished. A new item for smashing a wooden carving? Lan Xiaoni picked up the shiny golden key with a confused expression. What is this again? And Lin caught the key with an excited expression. No **T. This must be the key to open the shipwrecked treasure vault. One piece, it's mine. Lan Xiaoni,